humanity sends the first space expedition to Mars, which mysteriously perishes. Rescuers struggle to reach the red planet and discover an astonishing find that reveals the secret of the origin of humans and life on Earth.
I don't know what the hell we just did.
A party is held at the house of astronaut Luke Graham in honor of his departure to Mars. Families of his friends and colleagues gather, and the man says goodbye to those staying behind, including his friend Jim McConnell, who had long been preparing for this flight but had to leave the project due to his wife's illness. The friends wish Luke a safe flight and remember the deceased woman. She would have been happy that the mission takes place. In 2020, the first manned expedition arrives on the red planet. Soon people discover a strange white formation near the base in the Cydonia region, which they suspect is the extrusion of a layer of water which will be useful for future human colonization. Transmitting the news of the find to the command center aboard the International Space Station, 4 crew members head to the location of the formation for further research. Arriving on site, people see a tall mountain which radar identifies as metallic. Then the astronauts begin to hear a strange low sound, but they think is just interference from their Mars rover. And when they increase the power of their equipment, the sand beneath their feet starts to move. At first, this doesn't cause much concern. The astronauts stay in place, examining the mountain, above which a sand whirlwind is growing. But soon it begins to behave like a sentient being, seemingly examining the newcomers and then attacking them, killing 3 astronauts within seconds, and then emitting a powerful electromagnetic pulse, destroying most of the working electronics aboard the ship. After the whirlwind subsides, a huge human face carved out of dense material appears from under the layer of sand. The space station receives an unintelligible message from Luke, but they do not understand what happened and whether Luke is alive. The leadership realizes that the rescue expedition needs to be organized, but how this can be done technically is unclear. Then Jim proposes a solution to the problem, as he had developed plans for evacuation from Mars. The station commander agrees to consider it but opposes Jim's participation in the expedition because the man refused to undergo tests and left the project. Woody Blake insists on including his friend in the crew, as his refusal to go on the first flight was for a good reason. He was very worried about his wife. Moreover, it was he and his wife who studied and designed the flight to Mars. So Jim knows more about this planet than everyone else, which will undoubtedly help in the rescue mission. Hearing his arguments, the commander agrees, and the rescue ship with a team of 4 people heads to Mars. In addition to Woody and Jim, the crew includes specialist Terry Fisher, Woody's wife, and Phil Ohlmeyer. Along the way, Jim kindly envies the love between Woody and Terry, observing how tenderly they treat each other. Soon, the surface of Mars becomes visible from the ship, and people note that the expedition camp is intact, and even see 3 burial mounds next to the building. It is unclear what happened to Luke. Maybe there was simply no one to bury him. Soon, a magnetic storm covers the planet, and the astronauts can no longer see anything. Command gives permission to land. Woody goes to share the news with Jim and catches him watching a family movie from which it becomes clear that his wife was also an astronaut, and together with her husband they dreamed of flying to Mars. The ship is preparing to enter orbit around the red planet, but then a swarm of micrometeorites appears in its path, and one of the meteorites punctures the hull, injuring Phil's arm. The station begins to lose air, and Woody goes into open space to find and fix the breach. However, the breach is so small that it cannot be visually detected, and then Terry squeezes out juice which floats to the hole and seeps through it, indicating the breach. However, the crew does not notice another breach in the fuel line of one of the main engines. When the engine ignites, the fuel displaced into space explodes, destroying the ship. The crew has no choice but to quickly don their spacesuits and venture out into open space, hoping to maneuver to the supply module left in orbit from the first expedition. They find the module, but it is moving on a lower orbit than theirs, and too fast. Woody uses up all the fuel in his rocket pack to reach the module and secures a rope to it. However, he fails to stop his own flight and continues to fall towards Mars. Terry, wanting to save her husband, detaches her rope and goes after him. But Woody, realizing that if she continues to try to save him, she will face certain death, removes his helmet and perishes. Crying, Terry watches her husband's body fall to the planet and then returns to the others. The three astronauts land on the planet using the module. Although the module itself will not be able to take off again, the rescuers brought with them new motherboards for the first expedition ship, replacing the burnt-out ones. Upon arriving at the base of the first expedition, they explore it, but find no one. Although the living quarters are completely intact, Jim goes to the greenhouse and is amazed that all the plants are doing well, everything is functioning and working. The astronaut removes his helmet, and in the reflection on the water he sees Luke with an axe attacking him, not believing that this is a real person, not a vision. The man is seized, and only then does he begin to believe that they have come for him. The astronauts understand that Luke is not entirely mentally stable, as he has spent more than a year on Mars in complete isolation from the world. After recovering from the sandstorm attack, he buried the deceased and began studying the strange structure. He shows the rescue team the video recording of the discovery that cost his crew members their lives, and people are astonished, realizing that they are looking at the face of a humanoid. He then demonstrates his most important find, a recording of the sound he heard near the formation. After several months of analyzing the sound, he understood that it represents a diagram of human DNA on a rectangular coordinate system in space. Someone left it here as their signature. But later, remembering how Phil created the DNA of his ideal lover from candy, Jim realizes that this is not a signature. In reality, it is a peculiar test left by the creators instead of a lock guarding the entrance to somewhere. It turns out that the first expedition perished because they answered incorrectly. Instead of complementing the DNA proving that they were humans, the astronauts directed radar at the face. Since the answer was wrong, the structure's security system, the sandstorm, destroyed the intruders. The team heads to the Sphinx, but first they send a robot and transmit a signal with the supplemented DNA through it. A bright light shines from an entrance that appears in the face. Everyone except Phil, who stays behind to fix the ship, goes to the face. Jim gives Phil the order to take off at a precisely determined time, even if they don't return. Then the people enter a white room, the door closes, and the astronauts lose contact with the ship. Soon the room fills with Earth's atmosphere, and the people remove their helmets. Immediately behind them, another airlock opens, and upon passing through it, the astronauts find themselves in a dark room where they see a massive three-dimensional projection of the solar system. Then a hologram of a Martian appears, silently explaining to the people that in the distant past, a massive asteroid struck Mars, destroying the planet's ecosystem, which strongly resembled the Earth's. The Martians had to evacuate their race to other star systems, but they also sent a ship from Mars to neighboring Earth, containing the seeds of future life. Hundreds of millions of years later, multicellular plants and animals appeared on the planet, and no one could explain how it happened. Many years have passed since this panspermia. The new forms that emerged from the sent DNA evolved and became humans. They were supposed to return home to Mars one day so that the Sphinx would recognize them as the descendants of the grandiose experiment. The hologram reaches out to the Earthling, conveying that they belong to the same species. The Martian hologram disappears, and in front of them opens the hatch of a spaceship, on which someone from them can fly to the new home of the Martians. At this time, Phil unsuccessfully tries to contact his friends and prepares for takeoff. The people hear his warning that the storm is getting stronger and will soon engulf the ship. They realize that they need to hurry. But Jim refuses to return to Earth when the opportunity to fly to another galaxy arises. He is sure that this is an invitation and he was born precisely to reach the new world. Jim says goodbye to his friends. Terry gives him a small rocket pendant to remember, which once belonged to Woody, and the astronauts leave. Meanwhile, Phil repeats the call, but not receiving an answer, he hesitates to press the launch button. And Jim enters a light elevator that lifts him onto the Martian ship. The two remaining astronauts barely make it back to the ship due to the sandstorm, and only because Phil, contrary to the order, delays the takeoff. Meanwhile, Jim steps onto a circle that appears before him and suddenly realizes that he can't move as water rises around him. The man braces himself for drowning and holds his breath, but then he takes a breath and starts breathing underwater. He smiles, understanding that this is a new form of life. Images of his past life flash before his eyes, and the man seems to say goodbye to everyone once again. His crew, having taken off, watches through the porthole as the Martian ship with Jim on board flies away at high speed toward a distant galaxy and wishes him a safe journey. This good, kind-hearted science fiction film that was shot many years ago does not stand out for its dynamic plot, but despite numerous scientific inaccuracies, it is interesting to watch and keeps the tension until the last seconds.
This is the police. The scoops are on their way.
New York 2022. The mindless activities of humanity have led to environmental pollution and global warming, complicating life for mankind. The polluted atmosphere has destroyed nearly all natural wildlife, leaving people to fend for themselves. Natural foods are scarce, and people survive on concentrates produced by the large corporation Soylent. Their latest product, Soylent Green, is made from plankton and promises to feed everyone. However, it is currently produced in insufficient quantities. New York police detective Frank Thorne lives with his old friend, former police analyst Solomon Sol Roth, who has an excellent memory and serves as a kind of archive for Thorne. Moreover, he has preserved a police reference library to help his friend with investigations. This day begins with a conversation about a recent murder. Saul grumbles that Thorne expects too much from his notes. This isn't the Congressional Archive. Meanwhile, the power goes out. Saul reminisces about the old days when food was real and electricity worked without interruption. But people ruin nature, and now everything is dying. The man sits on a bicycle which generates energy for the apartment, while Thorne heads to work, stepping over the bodies of homeless people sleeping right on the staircase of his building. The streets are clogged with old cars that, due to a lack of fuel, now serve as homes for the poor or as venues for criminal meetings. In one of these cars, a young man named Gilbert receives a metal meat hook and instructions for an upcoming job from a criminal world representative. Meanwhile, in the apartment of the wealthy William Simonson, his girlfriend Shirley plays on a machine gifted to her. She is very pleased with a successful move and thanks her master when the security guard Fielding arrives to remind the girl that it's time to go. The couple heads to a store where the vendor sells them expensive products and shows them an item completely unattainable for ordinary people, a beef tenderloin. At this time, Gilbert uses the hook to infiltrate the residential complex for the privileged and ascends the Simonsons' apartment. Seeing the young man, the wealthy man remains completely calm, making no attempt to flee or call for security. Gilbert apologizes and explains that those who sent him can no longer rely on Simonson's silence. The wealthy man agrees with all his arguments and calmly confirms that what Gilbert is about to do is necessary for God. The young man raises the metal hook and strikes Simonson on the head. Sometime later, Thorne arrives at the deceased's home to investigate the case. He questions the caretaker, who assures him that the cameras malfunctioned, and leads the detective to the apartment where Shirley meets him. Ignoring her, Thorne examines the body of the deceased. Searching the apartment for clues, Thorne finds and consumes whiskey, beef, and other foods unavailable to him. Fielding talks about the shopping trip, and the policeman enjoys washing his hands in clean, warm water. He then collects the found papers, some pleasant items like toiletries, and the food into a separate bag, taken from Simonson's bedroom. Meanwhile, Shirley is distraught, thinking that if she hadn't left, Simonson would still be alive. But Fielding refutes her certainty, saying that she likely would have died too. Later, Thorne interrogates the girl, examining her hands. He doesn't fully believe in her sincerity, but Shirley assures him that she wouldn't risk her job. The fact is, she belongs to this apartment, like furniture. Now she will wait for the new tenant if he wants to keep her. At this time, Thorne is informed about the arrival of the sanitation crew. He orders them to take Simonson to the dump, but the crew reports that the wealthy man will be sent to the incineration plant. Shirley is saddened by this outcome, as she still remembers her grandmother's proper funeral. Thorne takes the bag of items and leaves. He returns to the apartment, stepping over the bodies of the homeless, and hands Saul gifts he hasn't seen in a long time: clean paper, soap, and pencils. He also lays out a classified Soylent report related to oceanography found in the deceased's apartment. Saul is overjoyed to see vegetables and cries at the sight of meat. The next day, Thorne goes to work. His boss, Lieutenant Hatcher, is unhappy that the case is still unsolved, but the policeman is convinced that the murder was a contract killing. Nothing was stolen from the apartment, there was no security, and the killer used a meat hook instead of a weapon to simulate a simple robbery. Therefore, the first thing the detective decides to do is check the bodyguard, and after tracking the man, he finds his girlfriend, Marta's apartment. Thorne searches the place, notices a spoon on the table stained with strawberry jam, and concludes that this is too luxurious an item for the bodyguard's girlfriend. Returning home, he sits down for dinner, prepared by Saul from the products he brought the day before. The friends savor long-forgotten tastes, and then Saul gets to the report. Studying the books brought by Thorne, he learned about Simonson's biography and his longtime partner Santini, who now serves as the governor of New York. Together they created the Soylent Project, which became very profitable for its developers. Thorne goes to the phone booth on the corner and reports to the lieutenant what he has learned, unaware that the person who gave Gilbert the meat hook is in his office. Meanwhile, a party is taking place in Simonson's apartment, organized by Shirley. Thorne arrives and demands answers to his questions. Shirley can't say anything specific, as Simonson didn't confide in her. However, she does know Santini. Simonson introduced her to him. In fact, Simonson had been acting strangely in recent months, worried and even visiting church. The couple retreats to the bedroom when the building manager bursts into the hall. He behaves very rudely with the girls, and Thorne declares that he asked them to gather to ask questions. The manager is forced to back off, but the upset girls leave. Shirley offers Thorne to stay the night, take a real bath, and enjoy breakfast. She doesn't like being alone and is happy with the man she likes, as the others don't ask her opinion. Thorne agrees to the invitation. The couple takes a shower together, enjoying amenities unavailable to ordinary mortals. Later, Thorne visits the church where the deceased wealthy man had gone. On the porch, he finds a dead woman with a child tied to her hand. Realizing that the mother can no longer care for her daughter, he takes the child and carries her into the church, but the building is crowded with people who have nowhere else to go. Finding the priest to whom Simonson confessed, Thorne tries to question him. However, exhausted by the huge, sick, and hungry flock, the priest only remembers the fact of the wealthy man's confession, not its details. Yet, under pressure from the policeman, he admits that the truth is killing him. It's so monstrous. Thorne returns to the lieutenant, who informs him that the Simonson case is closed, as it's a simple robbery. He asks to rewrite the report, but Thorne refuses to do so, finding everything too suspicious. For refusing to obey, Hatcher assigns Thorne to patrol the streets. That same day, Governor Santini is informed about the persistent policeman who refuses to close the case. Learning about Thorne's visit to the priest, Santini orders his elimination. Fielding goes to confession. Meanwhile, Thorne is patrolling the street where the Soylent distribution center is located. A large crowd gathers, and soon the product runs out, causing discontent among the crowd. The police recognize the danger and try to quell the unrest. However, people start rioting. The killer sent after Thorne tries to get close to him as machines with scoops arrive to load people into the truck beds and take them for processing. The killer shoots but misses, killing a woman standing next to the policeman. The crowd goes wild. The killer tries to reach Thorne, injuring several rioters and wounding the policeman in the leg. Thorne tries to capture him, but seeing the weapon, pushes the guy. He flies straight under the scoop of a machine and dies, depriving the policeman of the opportunity to question him and learn the truth. Nevertheless, convinced of Fielding's involvement in the conspiracy against him, Thorne sets up an ambush in the bodyguard's girlfriend Marta's apartment. The men fight, during which Thorne accuses the bodyguard of killing his boss and implicating the corporation in the attack on the policeman. Finally, he warns the man to stop following him, otherwise it will end very badly. After this, Thorne goes to Shirley. At this time, Solomon brings the oceanographic report to a group of scientists who call themselves the Investigators Bureau. Shirley has just finished bandaging Thorne and offers to go somewhere, but he doesn't know where they could run. Everywhere it's the same: hunger and a dying earth. The girl is upset as the new tenant is arriving today, but the policeman is sure she will please him. Meanwhile, the scientists announce the results of their research to Saul, and it is truly horrifying. Simonson, being a member of the Soylent board, learned everything, and his psyche couldn't handle it. The corporation realized they couldn't rely on him. To prevent him from talking, they eliminated him. Now, before going to the Supreme Council, they need to gather evidence. Saul is so shocked by the discovery that he decides to go to the place where they will help him die. Meanwhile, a new owner moves into Simonson's apartment. He meets Shirley and finds her attractive. That evening, Saul goes to the place, notifying Thorne in a note. The policeman immediately rushes to his friend. Saul is just answering the manager's questions. His favorite color is orange, and his favorite music is classical. The man is escorted to a private room where two young people help the old man undress. He is laid on a couch, classical music begins to play, and scenes of nature that no longer exist. Vanished forests, extinct wild animals, lost rivers, and the beauty of the ocean appear on a huge screen. At this time Thorn arrives at the house of the Lord, and they guide him to Saul's room, but the doors are already closed, and entering is impossible. The detective can only watch his friend's last moments through a viewing window. He watches the beautiful scenes with Saul, marveling at the lost beauty of nature. But Saul notices him and is happy to be able to say goodbye to his friend. Before dying, he tells him about his discovery and begs his friend to find the evidence and reveal the truth. After waiting for the end, Thorn follows the stretcher, carrying his friend's body. The man manages to sneak into the basement, where the bodies are loaded into large trucks, and he climbs onto one of them. Soon the truck arrives at the center for processing human bodies, and Thorn watches as the bags are unloaded and sent inside the factories. The man goes inside and soon finds a conveyor belt that lowers the bodies to a lower level. Thorn follows them, and after tracking the process, the man realizes that Soylent Green is made from processed human bodies. However, the guards spot him, and the policeman has to flee, killing several guards trying to detain him along the way. He soon reaches the city and tries to contact his precinct, but the line is busy. Then Thorn calls Shirley's apartment and asks the girl to stay with the new tenant and just live. Finally, Hatcher responds, annoyed by his subordinate's actions, but Thorn doesn't have time to say anything before he is attacked by the corporation's men, led by Fielding. The man fires back and runs to the church, though he is wounded. However, Fielding rushes after him. He searches for the policeman among the people filling the church, notices blood drops, and follows them, but Thorn attacks first. A fight ensues, people wake up and scream, but the policeman manages to kill his enemy with a knife picked up from the floor. At this moment, Hatcher arrives. Thorn tells him what he has learned and urges him to tell the Bureau members that the ocean is dying, and the plankton from which everyone thinks Soylent Green is made no longer exists. Soylent Green is made from people. So the corporation is intentionally breeding people like livestock. The lieutenant promises to take the necessary measures. Thorn is taken away by paramedics, but the man continues to shout that Soylent is made from people and asks the lieutenant to stop it. The final scenes replay the images shown to the dying Solomon Roth. The adaptation of Harry Harrison's novel turned out to be terrifyingly beautiful and compelling. The most frightening thing is that there is no resolution, nor can there be. Even if people learn the truth, what will change? And the focus of the plot on ordinary people conveys the fragility and insignificance of human lives, which remains unchanged throughout all times. An alien race from the depths of space colonizes Earth. Millions of people from around the world are sent to work in mines on other planets. Those left on Earth are controlled with implanted tracking chips and giant alien robots positioned around the perimeters of cities. Oh wow, you hear me? Ah! Chicago, 2019. The city is under martial law due to a massive alien attack on all major cities of the world. The Drummond family, a father, a mother, and their 2 sons, tries to leave the city, but all exits are blocked. When a police officer stops their car at one of the exits, the father presses the gas pedal and breaks through the blockade. Entering an exit tunnel, the man is forced to stop as the exit is blocked by aliens. Taken by surprise, the father freezes, although his wife asks him to turn around. Suddenly, an unknown pulse tears through both adults sitting in the front seats. The children, looking up, see an incomprehensible creature standing right in front of their car's hood. 9 years later, the world, having surrendered without a fight to the invaders, is completely under their control. The operation of vital productions, including power plants, has been restored everywhere. The aliens are called legislators because all laws and rules now come from them. Over the years since Earth's surrender, the aliens have forced humans to build suitable living spaces for them underground, called closed zones, where only high-ranking human officials are allowed entry. It became clear that the alien invasion aimed at Earth's resources, their extraction, and exportation led to huge social stratification. The rich, working for the aliens, continue to live well, while the poor have lost all guarantees, including education and healthcare. Police lawlessness thrives, and the deportation of all undesirable people from the planet has begun. The alien systems block all communication lines, so people know nothing about the life of other cities and countries. Amidst this wave, a resistance emerged, planning an attack on the closed zone in Chicago. But the plan failed, the zone was unharmed, and the fate of the rebels remains unknown, although the police assure that they were all eliminated. And this was supposed to be the first spark from which a flame would ignite. 9 years after the failed uprising in Chicago, the police monitor anyone who raises even the slightest suspicion. Detective William Mulligan reviews video recordings from Gabriel's apartment, whose brother Rafe died in the uprising and was posthumously named a hero of the resistance. The guy goes through his usual morning routines, then wakes up his girlfriend, showing her a photo taken on the other side of the lake, where visiting is now prohibited. But the girl does not want to believe in a change in their lives and asks not to invent the impossible. Gabe leaves the house where his friend, who has obtained and repaired a boat, is already waiting for him so they can sail out of the city tonight. But Gabe reminds him that he is under round-the-clock surveillance. Meanwhile, Mulligan reviews the newspapers and sees an advertisement for the Phoenix fire suppression system, after which he goes to his old friend Jane, who now runs a brothel. At the entrance, he sees the Phoenix emblem on the wall and notices the police chief. The owner greets Mulligan as a good friend and hands him a gift box, mentioning the Donnans and their gifts. Returning to the police station, he shares his findings. Phoenix exists and is preparing something for the New World Masters, but his partner does not believe that anyone could have survived the last purge. At this time in the subway, two resistance members meet because the newspaper advertisement is a battle readiness order given by their leader, whom they call First. He has learned that there is an entrance to the zone through the stadium, and soon there will be a Unity Festival, which high-ranking aliens will attend. The only thing left is to infiltrate. The next day, Gabe goes to work, having passed through the recognition system, since every person now has an identifier chip inside. The guy works in a data restoration center where he views millions of private videos a day and checks browser history requests. He sends all the collected information to the Central Information Center and destroys the carriers. Later, he receives a cigarette containing an unknown substance from his colleague and hides it behind his ear. After work, Gabe exits to the outside with a crowd of other workers and sees arriving guards grab and lead away one of the women. At the same time, an alien transport ship is sending off another batch of people as slaves for the alien mines from Earth. And around the perimeter of the city stand giant alien robots to prevent people from escaping. Gabe goes to the boat but is horrified at the sight of the weapon in his friend's hands. If they get caught, they will be instantly destroyed. Their scuffle is interrupted by the appearance of Mulligan, who orders Gabe to get into his car. He reminds the boy that he was his father's partner and now asks not to repeat his brother's mistakes and make the right choice. Gabriel has no information about Phoenix, and he does not intend to snitch, so the conversation goes nowhere. Gabriel goes to the person he is supposed to sell the acquired cigarette to, but the potential client pushes the boy into his van and, putting on them special collars that jam the tracking chip signal, drives him to the center of a destroyed district, where in one of the surviving buildings, Gabe meets his living brother. After a joyful reunion, Rafe tells him that he is the only survivor from his group. Unknown to him, Craftsman removed his chip, and now he has joined a new group. He takes the cigarette and, giving his brother a large sum of money, orders him to leave the area because Phoenix plans to attack the invaders. The brothers argue about the necessity of the uprising, but Rafe is sure that as long as there is time to fight, they should fight. Gabriel then rushes into his apartment and hurriedly starts packing, convincing his girlfriend to join him. The girl tries to persuade the boy to stay, and seeing the money and learning that Rafe is alive, asks the boy to think carefully, as they could then be recorded as accomplices. The couple argues, unaware that the police are closely listening to their conversation. Gabe leaves alone, but immediately encounters Mulligan, who was following him. Gabriel runs away from Mulligan and hides in the secret passages underground. He puts on the remaining collar, and the aliens' drones do not lose sight of him. Mulligan returns to the station, where he has an entire room dedicated to Phoenix, and notes that Rafe might be alive. At this time, Rafe's carrier pigeon reaches the recipient, and the information is passed along the chain to a secret IP center, where upon entering the received numbers, its worker displays Phoenix's target, an official who will gain access to the closed zone that day. The newspapers immediately publish Phoenix's announcement, and the group members receive the call. One of them, working on the radio, plays a conditional track heard by a man with a dog, who immediately takes her for a walk. Her bark is heard by a mechanic girl who rushes to her car. Later, they arrive at an underground clinic where a doctor performs complex operations to remove the tracking chips. Then, he hands over the chips extracted from law-abiding citizens previously deceased from diseases, as well as special containers that need to be kept in the mouth, so they too will be recognized as law-abiding citizens. Meanwhile, one of the resistance members, serving as a priest, meets with Rafe. The pair goes to an arms dealer and receives invisible explosive material from a girl extracted from a crashed alien ship. If attached to an organic carrier's skin or hair, scanners will not be able to detect it. Later, the resistance group gathers together. The leader distributes containers with new chips and shows a photo of the person who will go to the aliens. Lastly, he hands out poison capsules to everyone, which will help avoid being captured alive by the enemy. The group freely enters the festival and attaches the invisible alien explosive device to an official. He goes to the arriving aliens and explodes with them. The city is immediately locked down, and the police block the streets to find the attackers. The priest is the first to die, caught in gunfire. Rafe is caught by one of the aliens and tries to escape from it, hiding in a van. This is seen by the guy's comrades, who come to his rescue and destroy the alien. The surviving rebels try to escape from the city, while the aliens bring in hunter warriors from another world, and they quickly track down Rafe and his accomplices. Enraged, the legislators prepare to destroy the district where, according to their information, the resistance is based. Mulligan tries to persuade the police chief, who is heading to report to the aliens, not to allow this because he needs time to catch the suspects. But he is reminded that the decision is made and his search interests no one. Raids begin in the city, during one of which Gabe is captured, while his brother and two of his comrades reach the station and board buses 2 minutes before the expiration of the chips from law-abiding citizens. But when it seems they have managed to escape, the buses are stopped by the hunters. Realizing his capture is inevitable, one of the group takes the poison capsule. The mechanic girl attacks a hunter and is instantly vaporized. Rafe tries to run but is captured and brought to the police, where his brother is being interrogated at the same time. Mulligan shows him how Rafe is tortured to make him talk about Phoenix and give up first. Gabe learns that the city is preparing for destruction and agrees to send a message to the leader. He is brought to the surviving members of the resistance, and hearing that the guy allegedly knows ways into the zone, they agree to connect him with First. Gabe is brought to Jane Doe, who is number 1 and the leader of the resistance in the city. Upon seeing the boy, the woman calls him by name, which confuses Gabrielle, and at that moment, a police squad raids the brothel and kills Jane. The investigation reveals that Jane had installed listening devices to record conversations with police officers she served to gather secret information. Later, during a briefing with the aliens, Mulligan names the members of Phoenix who, learning about the death of First, voluntarily left this life. Before the invasion, Jane was a history teacher and changed her profession to gather secret information. Mulligan presents recordings obtained in the brothel, where it is heard that the police chief actively leaked secret information about the aliens. Captured resistance members are deported to alien mines, and Mulligan, having declared the neutralization of the Chicago threat, is appointed acting commissioner. Later, he meets with Gabe and puzzles the boy with a new thought. What if the failure of the uprising was planned? And he hands the boy a memory card, extracted from a phone once given to him by Jane. The next day, Gabe views its contents, a video dedicated to a party before his birth, where close family friends record messages for him. There, he sees both Mulligan and Jane Doe, who was acquainted with his mother, as well as some other members of Phoenix. Meanwhile, Mulligan is allowed to arrive at the Earth Control Center and meet with the legislators in their habitat. As he heads to the spaceship, the same invisible substance that was part of the explosive used in the stadium attack manifests on him, explaining that Mulligan is also part of the resistance, and the plan was organized so that he could infiltrate the main alien base and set off an explosion. During the credits, a map shows that the plan worked, and the city blockades were successfully lifted, after which many resistance foci flared up everywhere. This means that the plan to light a match and ignite a bonfire was a success, and humanity begins an active fight against the alien oppressors. Despite the film being labeled as science fiction, the message here is quite realistic. How will humanity behave when it realizes the possibility of its total occupation? Also, the filmmakers draw belief in victory from the history of humanity, using Lenin's motto, "A spark will kindle a flame." The struggle, the underground conspiracy. The film is full of revolutionary stylistics, and it watches like a real political thriller. Aliens arriving on Earth first kill an entire small town and then bring half of its population back to life, although it's hard to call it life.
We searched for a new home. We found one. This planet.
Somewhere in Pennsylvania, in the small town of Berridge, a family sits down for dinner. Suddenly there is a loud bang outside, the lights go out and people briefly come to their senses before dying. Later on, exobiologist Lawrence Stone hears news reports on TV about a powerful explosion in Berridge that killed the entire population of the town, 1,300 people. The air in the settlement is poisoned by some toxic substance, and the theory that the explosion occurred at the local chemical plant becomes increasingly popular. Lauren takes a bath and remembers herself, her father, and a field she used to run through. Her memories are interrupted by the arrival of the military, although Lauren does not quite understand how she can help with the investigation. Colonel Emmerich introduces her to astrobiologist Santiago. Geologists confirmed that the accident was the result of a meteorite impact which released a deadly gas. That's why they were invited to the crash site. The military will be grateful for any evidence they find that can shed light on the nature of the incident. Emmerich assures Lauren that he chose her because he read her work, but asks her to take an alcohol test. Scientists are dressed in protective suits and taken to the meteorite crash site. On the way, Santiago praises her book on microbiology in Antarctica and signs of extraterrestrial life, but the woman doesn't engage in conversation. Arriving at the site, the pair only sees a snowy field and a small pile of ground. While Santiago inspects the area, Lauren notices a small sprout of some red plant and pities it for growing in such a terrible place. Upon arriving home, Lauren begins to search for similar cases and finds mention of a similar incident. In 2013, a meteorite exploded over the city of Chelyabinsk in Russia, and an interview with the local resident was filmed by American television. She recounted that after the meteorite fell, a poisonous gas spread throughout the area, causing many people to die. It was also said that a very large tree grew at the site of the impact, around which all living things died. The tree was cut down and information about the incident was kept secret. In the postscript to the interview, journalists reported that the woman was killed almost immediately after it. The next day, doctors begin to perform an autopsy on the man who died in Berridge, and at first everything looks completely normal. But when the doctor makes an incision, a strange blue liquid begins to seep out, which then returns to the body after a short time and the wound heals. But even more surprising is the resurrection of the man who suddenly sits up on the table and silently looks down, not reacting to the voices of those around him. The man has no pulse or blood pressure and his body is cold. In other words, by all indications, the man is dead. Suddenly there are cries behind the door. It turns out that another 40 people suddenly opened their eyes and came back to life. The doctors tried to get some kind of reaction from the resurrected, but to no avail. They are all residents of the town center who not only inhaled the poisonous gas but also ingested some substance that led to DNA transformation, and the only thing the resurrected do is occasionally turn around. Meanwhile, Lauren tells Emmerich about the Chelyabinsk meteorite, but the people in Russia were also victims, which means that this is someone's terrible plan. But the colonel does not believe in conspiracy theories. Later, a government commission discusses the incident and proposes simply destroying the bodies before it's too late. But to get answers, all the data must be carefully studied, otherwise Manhattan could be next. Later, the woman buys alcohol and drinks it while sitting in the car, reminiscing about a trip she took with her father to a secret place. The next day, Lauren goes to a room where the revived people are sitting and, selecting a girl, tells her about a book her mother used to read to her when she was a child, who has long since passed away. At that moment, her phone rings and a photo of the red plant from the scene of the incident appears on the screen, and the girl suddenly grabs Lauren's hand. The woman tells her colleagues about this and suggests that the plant is to blame. Santiago notices that all the survivors are looking in one direction, to the north, where the crash site is located. And then the colonel confesses that they found a sapling, but they don't know what it is because the plant is huge and continues to grow. The thing is that the area is sealed off and the plant was only noticed when it became visible from a distance. It turns out that it wasn't a meteorite that fell on the ground, but a huge seed. A team of scientists is sent to the site, taking one of the revived with them. They bring him to an unimaginably huge tree on a cart and watch from a distance, but he remains motionless. And when people have lost all hope, the man in the wheelchair suddenly moves, raises his head, looks in surprise at his hands and the snow under his feet, and then he admits that he can't survive in the Earth's environment, so he will stay here. Upon returning, Lauren reports that the tree is generating the necessary environment for its survival, including the air that is toxic to humans. The aliens arrived on Earth through special portals that scientists call wormholes. She is bombarded with questions, revealing that she has had problems with alcohol and prohibited substances. Later, a psychotherapist calls her answering machine, who was waiting for her at the session as part of his sentence. They were supposed to discuss her childhood memories that are haunting her, but she didn't show up. At that moment, her father shows up at the door, but Lauren is not pleased to see him. He tries to start the conversation and recalls how on her 8th birthday she asked for a scientific laboratory and they gave her an old barn. However, her obsession with space spiraled out of control and her mother became worried. Sometime later, the colonel summons Lauren again. The alien wants to speak, but only with her, as he sees her as a friend. They have prepared a list of questions and ask her to find out where they came from and why they came. The alien explains that their home is no longer suitable for their species. They were searching for a new home and found it using coordinates received from a human with the call sign Supernova 94. From that same human, the aliens learned all the strengths and weaknesses of humans. The alien asks the military to leave, and Lauren admits that the tree will soon destroy everything as it is harming the planet. The alien then says that humans will not be able to stop them because they are used to fighting and they have abilities. And here Santiago starts acting strangely. He drops his suitcase and begins to unzip his protective suit. The military personnel try to contain him, but they cannot do anything. The man falls to the ground and tears the hose from the mask of a soldier who was trying to help him. The soldier removes his useless mask and dies. Then one of the soldiers suggests shooting the alien, and just then they are hit by a sound attack that drives them crazy and they open fire on each other. One of the survivors takes stunned Lauren away. Later, a fighter jet armed with missiles is sent to the tree. The pilots see a small figure of a person at the base of the tree and receive orders to attack the target. But suddenly an impenetrable dome covers the tree. The missiles explode, causing no harm to the tree. Meanwhile, the news reports that the FBI is searching for a person with the nickname Supernova 94 who seems to be responsible for the expansion. People around the world tell stories about strange sounds that occasionally come from unknown sources. In some places, smoke emerges from the ground, killing all living things. People pray day and night, and martial law has been imposed in many countries. The earth trembles, crops die, and vegetables rot in the ground. One day, Lauren goes to her father's house, but first she approaches the locked barn, which has a sign that reads Lauren's Laboratory. But after looking at the house, she walks away and heads towards the tree. For many years, she has been tormented by the question of who or what she is. The end of the world is approaching, but she feels relief, as if she will finally live freely. And she plans to find the truth right here. She meets the alien who tells her that the tree is undergoing transformation. Feeling the tremble under her feet, Lauren lies down on the ground and listens to the hum of the planet. The time has come, new life is growing, and all of this has happened because of her. And finally, Lauren remembers the day when her father brought her to a secret base where an unidentified flying object had been brought down. Her father left her to wait in the corridor. Bored, she wandered through the rooms, listening to her father being instructed about a powerful and hostile creature that had tried to plant something before it was shot down by the military. The girl found the sarcophagus containing the alien and reached out to the glass. Suddenly, the creature reached out and touched the glass from the other side. She screamed in terror, not understanding what strange thing was happening to her, causing her to lose consciousness. The frightened guard found her and took her to her father. But the girl looked healthy and left with her father. Only from that day on, Lauren hasn't been quite herself. She draws super complex designs of interstellar ships and writes incomprehensible formulas. At school, she constantly gets in trouble, skillfully manipulating not only her classmates but also her teachers, calling herself an alien who wants to go home. And one day, Lauren tunes a transmitter she has built and contacts a distant planet, taking the call sign Supernova 94. Her parents are horrified and forbid her from entering the laboratory. Lauren smashes toys, draws on walls, and tells her mother the date of her death. It is then that her father learns of her new DNA. The girl seems to be changing, becoming something other than human. Adult Lauren sobs in horror at her discovery, but the alien welcomes her home and she remembers telling the distant planet all about Earth. Meanwhile, mysterious egg-shaped objects begin to appear all over the planet. They emerge everywhere, in forests and cities, deserts and mountains. And one day they suddenly explode, spreading black smoke that kills all life around them. And no one can hide or survive as the roots have already penetrated the entire Earth. The planet is no longer suitable for the human race. All earthly species and plants have been extinct. The evolution of a new species has begun and Lauren's journey has come to an end. She's finally home. And this is where the movie ends. The year is 4032. Most of humanity has mutated into new creatures called Abbeys. In the 21st century, Professor David Pilcher foresaw an unknown mutation in human DNA and built the town of Wayward Pines, which was meant to serve as an ark for the last surviving humans. The chosen ones, those who were destined to restore the human population, were frozen without their consent for 2,000 years. However, upon awakening, not everyone was pleased with life in a city surrounded by a tall fence with millions of monsters lurking outside. Dr. Theo Yedlin is on vacation at the beach. In a bar, he strikes up a conversation with a stranger who, at first glance, doesn't raise any suspicion. But the casual chat ends strangely. Yedlin wakes up several years later to find himself in the town of Wayward Pines. On his way to the hospital, accompanied by a group of strangers, Theo manages to escape. He seeks help at the first house he finds, hoping to call the police. But as he observes the strange behavior of the homeowners, Theo begins to doubt if he's doing the right thing. The police do respond to Yedlin's call, but instead of offering help, they return him to the hands of the strangers. They take Theo to the hospital, and after telling him a story about a government experiment, the people in black ask him to work for the good of society. The kidnappers ask Theo to save a patient who is extremely important to them. After examining the girl, Yedlin promises to do everything possible and instructs them to prepare the operating room while he assesses the seriousness of her injuries. Theo's patient turns out to be Kate. While the doctor operates on the girl, Carrie reports to Jason about losses within the ranks of the first generation. Looking at a photo of his rival, the dictator realizes that as long as Ben is free, their movement in the city are in danger. This is confirmed by Megan, who appears in the room. She reminds him of Pilcher's main rule: clear laws, strict punishment. Theo visits his patient, and she tries to tell him what's really going on. But Carrie doesn't allow the doctor to listen to Kate and instead urges him to take a break. While walking through the town, Theo witnesses soldiers separating a woman from her young son. The doctor tries to intervene but is once again prevented from understanding what's going on and is forced to walk away. However, later Yedlin does learn the woman's fate. She is brought to the central square along with others, accused of rebellion. Jason addresses the cheering crowd, assuring everyone that his cruelty is the path to humanity's salvation. After these words, he executes the woman without any explanation. Megan visits Kate in the hospital room and suggests they unite for the future of Wayward Pines. But Kate attacks her rival, armed with a scalpel. Kate confesses that she will never watch as dictators destroy the world. She raises the scalpel and ends her suffering. Mario brings Theo and other prisoners to the wall. He opens a passage and, after jamming the gas pedal with a rock, sends the vehicle into the lair of the Abbeys. The monsters notice the prey but run past, trying to climb over the fence. Members of the First Generation movement watch a motivational video left for them by Pilcher, followed by footage from surveillance cameras showing the Abbeys attempting to breach the wall. The creatures sacrifice themselves to create a ramp, allowing their comrades to infiltrate Wayward Pines. Jason realizes something is wrong and orders a squad to gather and check the situation in person. Meanwhile, the prisoners, led by Ben, try to escape from the vehicle, taking advantage of the fact that the monsters are ignoring them. Military vehicles approach the wall and soldiers open fire on the Abbeys. But despite this, some creatures manage to leap over the barrier and engage in open combat. The first to be injured is Carrie. An Abbey slashes open her stomach and Jason is forced to leave his subordinates to take his companion to the hospital. Very soon, the leader regrets his decision to get rid of Theo. No one is capable of performing the complex surgery and saving the girl. Jason orders the doctor to be found, and several vehicles must drive beyond the wall. Without resisting, Theo jumps into one of them to avoid falling into the hands of the advancing mutants. The leader of the movement asks Yedlin to perform the operation, but Theo refuses to proceed without an explanation of what's going on. Jason is forced to strike a deal with the doctor, promising to return his wife and revealing that aside from Wayward Pines, there are no other humans. The rest of the planet is overrun by Abbeys. After the surgery, Carrie regains consciousness. Another problem for the town arises: depleted supplies. Jason asks CJ to prepare for the harvest, which is beyond the wall, but the town must prepare carefully for the encounter with the Abbeys. Theo has to come to terms with his new role. He is appointed the head and most likely the only doctor in Wayward Pines. The only thing he disagrees with is the portrait of Pilcher hanging on the wall of his new office. Megan gives a lecture for the teenagers, using an Abbey body to show the mutants' weak points. One of the students admits he knows about the attempted breach, but Megan assures him that the only danger to the town is the rebels. Everything else is under control of the authorities. After examining one of the teenagers, Theo informs Jason of serious issues. Due to the food shortage, the health of the residents is at risk. However, the young dictator doesn't appreciate the doctor's tone or his attempts to change the order in Wayward Pines. CJ prepares a team for the harvest. He suggests using fire as protection against the Abbeys, and after a brief briefing, the vehicles drive beyond the wall to bring back the harvest and save the town. The monsters attack immediately as the harvesters appear, but CJ's plan works. The fire scares off the Abbeys, and the group has some time to gather food. One of the soldiers unexpectedly encounters Ben, but the young man refuses to help his old friend, fearing severe punishment for associating with a rebel. The loaded vehicles leave, and Ben doesn't manage to pass through the open gates. He then stands in front of the camera and addresses Jason, stating that all of the leader's actions are the wrong choice in tyranny. Rumors that Ben is still alive reach his mother. Teresa tries to find out details from the soldiers and persuade them to return for the boy, but no one wants to deal with the troublemakers. Ben continues to hide in the danger zone, hoping to return to Wayward Pines, but a pack of Abbeys attacks the boy, turning him into a hearty meal. Jason checks the cameras and notices that there are no Abbeys in any of the sectors. The leader celebrates, believing he has driven the monsters out and that the town is now completely safe. But it seems the mutants have a different opinion. Several soldiers are sent on a reconnaissance mission, but they spot nothing except a frightened deer. This pleases Jason greatly, as he is convinced the Abbeys have left, but Carrie sees an unpleasant side to this. If Ben isn't found, the leader will have to answer to the town for the death of one of the first generation. At night, voices are heard in Jason's house, and, loading his weapon, the young man goes downstairs. To his surprise, Pam appears before him. The old woman reminds her protege of everything she taught him. She confesses that she killed her brother only because he tried to save the town through dictatorship and violence. Pam asks Jason to let her stay and help him build a truly bright future and save humanity. Jason agrees to forgive the traitor and takes her to the square to announce his decision to the town. Unbeknownst to Jason, Pam sneaks into the lab where the captured Abbeys are kept. Megan arrives shortly after, but the thief manages to leave without revealing her intentions for coming there. Back at home, Pam plans to use a drug she stole from the lab. Her plan is interrupted by Theo's arrival, but the nurse quickly directs him to the door to get what she came for in the hated town. Megan learns of the stolen drug, but it turns out it wasn't a medicine. Pam had taken a smallpox sample. Meanwhile, Pam attends a meeting in Jason's office. She unexpectedly kisses her protege in a way she never had before and joins the conversation. Dr. Yedlin bursts into the room. He orders everyone to leave without touching anything and avoiding contact with people. The doctor then reveals Pam's plans, and the woman doesn't even attempt to resist. Pam admits that, in her opinion, Wayward Pines should be destroyed. She asks Jason to put an end to the story, but the leader orders the traitor to be arrested. At night, Jason goes on a walk with Pam. He asks his mentor to tell him the end of the story about Wayward Pines, but after receiving an answer that wounds his pride, the dictator kills the old woman. A few days after the Abbey attack, Xander finally wakes up at the bottom of a deep well. There, the young man is found by a mutant, but he manages to defeat the monster and climb to the surface. At a meeting on the problems of Wayward Pines, CJ discusses the need to increase the area of crops. The population is growing, but food is becoming scarcer. Carrie and Megan believe it's too early to address this issue, but Jason supports the farmer and allows him to search for new fields. Xander is quietly approached by a man with a knife. He demands that Xander reveal who sent him and who currently rules the town. The savage himself says he has been here for a very long time. He is the only one from the team Pilcher sent to search for other survivors. Guards notice movement near the wall, and a duty squad is dispatched to the scene. The soldiers recognize Xander, accompanied by the stranger, but let them inside without question. The savage is immediately sent to Dr. Yedlin. Theo tries to find out from the patient if there are other people beyond the wall, but the man only says that the Abbeys are not the enemy. They are the replacement meant to take their place. Jason learns the name of the savage, Adam Hassler. He asks the doctor to tell him everything the patient said, but Theo refuses to disclose the confidential information and suggests the leader speak to the survivor personally. Throughout this time, Hassler struggles to recover. He is constantly haunted by nightmares of Abby attacks he endured during his months beyond the wall. Finally, the man can no longer take it and decides to leave the hospital, fearing that the mutants will get to him there. The savage escapes into the streets, frightening crowds of townspeople. His hallucinations, in which mutants attack him, intensify, forcing him to find shelter in a deserted alley. There, Adam is discovered by Teresa. She recognizes an old acquaintance and tries to find out if he has seen Ben, but the savage hesitates to tell the woman the truth. Theo tells his wife about Adam's words, and Rebecca urges him to inform the town's leadership. The town sends off the first group, who go in search of new lands suitable for settlement and cultivation. Teresa stops CJ's vehicle and asks to join the mission so she can find her son. Hassler also joins the soldiers, having failed to adjust to the peaceful life in town. CJ gazes with excitement at the landscape he hasn't seen in a very long time. He orders the squad to set up camp and prepares for a night outside the wall. Adam leaves without explanation, but later that night he returns, causing a stir in the camp. Hearing the commotion, Rachel wakes up and the soldiers part to reveal what the savage has brought. On the ground lies a covered body, and even before she removes the covering, it becomes clear that Ben is underneath it. Rebecca brings Lucy, the girl she's trying to protect from the harsh rules of Wayward Pines, into her home. Upon learning that the girl is to be placed in the breeding program, Theo becomes furious and supports his wife's decision. Frank, Lucy's brother, feels responsible for her rule-breaking. He escapes from the academy and goes for an evening walk, but in the city center he faces a greater shock, and Abby appears on the town's carousel. The mutant stands tall before the boy, and this is caught on surveillance cameras. Jason orders the main streets to be cordoned off and makes sure no one finds out what's happening. Several armed men come to the boy's aid, but Carrie asks the leader not to destroy this creature. It is the first female Abby they have encountered. Despite attempts to keep the incident a secret, Frank becomes a school hero. Megan studies the new creature and reports to the leadership about the behavioral differences. According to the scientist, the female is much calmer than her counterparts, and the other captive Abbies have also become more peaceful since her arrival. The doctor also shows the Abby's palm. It bears a strange pattern, unlike any scars. Megan believes this pattern might help them learn more about the mutants and eventually eradicate them. A search of the city yields no results. No other creatures are found, nor are there any breaches in the wall. No one can explain how the female managed to enter the city or why she did so. The only explanation that comes to Jason's mind is that the Abbies may have accomplices among the population. Jason turns to Rebecca for help. She designed the city and may know the way the Abby got inside. Upon learning that a new Abby has appeared in the lab, Theo requests access to the research. Carrie agrees, but she warns the doctor that not all group members will like this. Naturally, Carrie is referring to Megan. The scientist makes every effort to appear satisfied with the doctor's presence, but she disobeys all of Yedlin's orders and conducts experiments that could harm the mutant. The Abbies have quickly learned the lesson with fire. After making torches, they surround the cornfield and set it ablaze. The creature in the lab at that moment feels everything that is happening to its pack. Several years before the current events, unaware that a human invasion is imminent, the Abby tribe enjoys a peaceful life deep in the forest. But suddenly a helicopter appears over the mutants' camp, and most of the tribe is wiped out. Only a few survive, with no other choice but to seek revenge. In the city, a siren blares, and panic begins. At the same time, the Abbies set another field on fire, knowing that by doing this, they are depriving humans of any chance of survival. Adam is the first to notice the mutants approaching. He raises the alarm and orders the squad to move to a safe place, but it's already too late. The first creatures infiltrate the camp, and one of them attacks Teresa. Megan, unaware of anything, works on reports in the lab. She is only distracted when the Abbies start banging on their cages, and the close proximity no longer feels safe. Theo learns that the food fields are burning. At that moment, Carrie arrives and asks the doctor to return to the hospital and prepare for a difficult night. Jason sends out several dozen vehicles, all civilian men, or to extinguish the fields, while the military protects them from Abby attacks. Realizing how this will end, Theo orders his colleagues to prepare all available beds and be ready to receive not tens but hundreds of patients. The battlefield truly becomes a nightmare. The Abbies are far more clever and resourceful. There's no one left to extinguish the fields. Soldiers fall before they can even reach them, suffering severe injuries from the mutants. Within an hour, the hospital turns into chaos. The screams of patients mix with the bustle of medical staff who are not prepared for such an onslaught. Theo tries to help everyone, but he cannot save them all, and many patients die in the hands of frightened interns. CJ recounts how the Abbeys attack the camp and everyone trying to extinguish the fire. But Carrie and Megan don't believe the farmer's words. They are convinced the mutants have no intelligence and thus could not have had a plan. Jason sides with the women. He is more concerned about the fate of the harvest, but CJ has no good news. All the fields have been burned, and in less than 6 weeks the city will fall to starvation. The food shortage is not the only threat. Theo informs the leader that there is a critical shortage of medicine, and soon people will begin to die from simple colds or minor cuts. Yedlin doesn't hold back in his critique, saying that Pilcher was an idiot. In creating his own world, he failed to consider the basics. Jason's thoughts are interrupted by news that around 100 Abbeys have gathered near the wall. Despite the obvious situation, the leader refuses to admit that the mutants are evolving and the advantage has long been on their side. Teresa spends several hours in intensive care, but her heart gives out, and the last thing the woman sees is her son and husband, with whom she will finally reunite. Megan performs an MRI on the Abbey, and looking at the monitor, Theo sees a surprising result. The part of the brain responsible for thinking and problem-solving is twice the size of a human's. The Abbey's roar echoes throughout the city. The monitor shows that several thousand mutants have gathered near the wall. The creatures locked in the cages respond to their kin, but the female remains remarkably calm. After a conversation with Adam, Theo examines the female Abby's hand and discovers the pattern. He becomes furious that Megan hadn't told him about the design, but the scientist doesn't understand the significance at this moment. The doctor asks Megan not to interfere while he tries to establish contact with the Abbey. In Theo's opinion, it's the only way to find out what the mutants want and save the city. Yedlin shows the mutants several cards with pictures and tries to explain their meaning. CJ had been one of those who woke up from cryosleep every 100 years to observe changes on Earth. During one such outing, the botanist met a strange young man. He still resembled a human, but had peculiar features. The stranger rambled, ate raw fish, and suffered from unknown ailments. CJ couldn't shake the new companion. The young man demanded to be taken with him and cared for. To avoid risking the others, CJ eliminated the threat. Theo asked Megan to offer the Abbey a treat, but the mutant points towards its kin. This confirms the doctor's theory. She is not just an intelligent creature. She is a leader who cares for her pack. Adam bursts into the lab, demanding that the scientists release the female. He claims that she is the leader of the Abbeys, and her followers are gathering near the wall, ready to do anything to save their leader. A heated argument erupts among the group. Megan is convinced that Adam is overestimating the importance of the mutant, while Theo believes the leader's presence could help them negotiate with the creatures and save the city. Memories take CJ back to the day he woke up and roused the others. Pilcher, the founder of the project, was confident that mutations had ended several hundred years ago and that they were now facing only an empty, uninhabited Earth. But the scientist was wrong. The first walk in the forest reveals strange creatures vaguely resembling humans. Pilcher didn't even attempt to make contact. He also refused to return to cryosleep and slumber for several more centuries. The only thing that occurred to the professor was to declare the mutants enemies, build a city, and fence it off with a tall, electrified wall. Theo tries to communicate with the female Abbey, but Jason arrives at the lab. Like Megan and his predecessor, Pilcher, the leader of the first generation, refuses to seek a peaceful solution, convinced that the remaining humans will prevail against the thousands of creatures at the fence. The argument goes in circles, but Yedlin reminds everyone that the lives of all the city's residents are at stake. Dr. Yedlin explains to the Abbey that Jason is their leader, but the female mutant disagrees. She shows the doctor that he should be the leader of the town. This infuriates the young dictator, and he tries to stop the experiment, but Theo stands his ground. Signaling that he means no harm, Theo unlocks the cage of a male Abbey and tries to enter, but the aggressive mutant doesn't share the doctor's optimism and grabs his arm. On one hand, this frightens everyone present, but on the other, they see the female giving a signal, and the monsters obey her. In Theo's opinion, everything went perfectly, but Jason thinks otherwise. Before the leader's eyes, he kills the males and plans to eliminate her as well. Theo wrestles the gun from the madman, and Carrie tries to convince him not to argue with the others. She asks her friend to leave and think things over while the doctor continues his experiments. Megan notices a crimson puddle beneath her and feels unwell. The last thing she sees is the freed female Abbey behind her. At the moment when Theo was unlocking the code, the creature memorized the combination and easily repeated it. The city's residents are assured that nothing dangerous is happening and that they can continue their normal lives. But Theo returns to the lab and realizes that things are far from normal. He discovers Megan's body in the empty cage of the female Abby. At the same time, the mutant sneaks towards the exit. Jason arrives at the scene. He orders the building to be searched, unwilling to admit that he is responsible for what happened. The soldiers search every corner of the hospital, including the underground passages, but it's already pointless. The mutant is running through the forest, making her way to her kind. Suddenly, the Abby slips off a cliff, but she manages to collect herself and lands unharmed. Dr. Yedlin insists that they must warn the townspeople. If the female Abby reaches the exit, she will likely open it for thousands of her kin. But Jason stubbornly holds his ground. He plans to send unarmed townsfolk to search for the creature and fight the other Abbies. The town's school children are locked in the school building. The other residents are also informed of the Abby's escape and are ordered to lock themselves in their homes to avoid encountering the creature. The Abby hides in the forest and notices Frank and Lucy walking by. She also sees a couple in love, but she doesn't attack the teenagers, trying to avoid detection. After this, the monster heads straight for the city and attacks one of the soldiers who participated in the hunt. The scream of the unfortunate soldier echoes throughout Wayward Pines, warning the residents of the danger. The Abby takes the body of its victim with it. Soldiers spot the Abby on the rooftops of houses. They open fire, but once again the monster manages to escape. The mutant continues to toy with the people, appearing in different locations. All those with any kind of weapon are called in to join the search. Xander gathers a small team, hoping to track down the Abby. Theo and Adam also set out in search of the mutant, but all they find is the body of a soldier, which the creature dragged away. The hunters realize it was a trap. The Abby lured them into the forest so they wouldn't interfere with her final tasks in the city. Armed citizens flood the streets, but the Abby manages to evade them, remaining unnoticed. This leads to frightened hunters firing at each other, solving the mutant's problems for her. Finding several bodies and shooters in the street, Theo tries to de-escalate the situation. He asks a young woman to let the soldiers go so they can take their comrade to the hospital. The number of red dots on the monitor rapidly increases, indicating the number of Abbies near the wall. Jason shows Carrie the bunker designed especially for them. He confesses to her that this shelter would allow them not only to survive, but also to enter cryosleep for as long as needed to eventually restore Earth. However, Carrie is forced to admit to her boyfriend that after the Abby's attack, she cannot have children, and there's no point in wasting a capsule on her. Rebecca encounters the Abby in the middle of the city, but before the monster can attack, Xander injures the mutant, protecting his fiancée and their future child. Breathing a sigh of relief, the couple hurries to the wall to find weak spots and fix them. Xander remembers the pit, and the group theorizes that it might be a tunnel leading into the city. The wounded female Abby flees into the forest and finds an entrance to such a tunnel. She prepares to leave the city, but Adam appears behind her, intent on killing the mutant. The female Abby straightens up, and fear flashes in her eyes. Seeing this, the hunter lets her go to her kind. Adam also enters the tunnel, determined to end this once and for all. Jason's squad finds a pipe from which the wild cries of the mutants can be heard. The leader orders the passage to be blown up, hoping this will stop the wild mutants. Adam manages to escape from the other side of the tunnel, but there, he is met by a crowd of wild, hungry Abbies. However, the female with the pattern on her hand does not allow them to harm the man who saved her life and helped her escape. Hassler walks past unharmed. Despite the return of the leader, the crowd of Abbies does not leave the area around the fence. The Abby leader reaches the camp and is taken in by caring elders, remembering all those who became victims of humanity. Observing the Abbies, Carrie sees that the escaped female is getting worse, and her kin gather around to say their goodbyes. But Jason is not moved by this news. He sees no tragedy in the death of an ordinary mutant. Realizing that all the city's problems are caused by the dictator's stubbornness, Theo decides to address the issue and turns to Xander for help, but the men don't have time to discuss things. CJ invites the doctor to an important meeting with Jason. The leader offers two options: surrender and accept their end, or go back into cryosleep. The female Abby's condition worsens, but her kin don't abandon her. They treat her wound and do everything they can to keep their leader alive. Jason addresses the townspeople, tells them about the Abby invasion, and gives instructions for the evacuation. This causes unrest, but CJ steps in to calm everyone down, assuring them that the process is completely safe. After giving several lectures, CJ heads to the control center to check the equipment, but the plan is under threat. The program encounters a loading error. CJ informs Jason of the issue, insisting that the capsules need to be recharged. But there is hardly any time left, and the leader will have to choose who gets to leave the danger zone first. To make the right decision, Jason asks Dr. Yedlin to check all the citizens' profiles and assess their health on a 5-point scale. Theo dislikes this idea and suggests using a lottery to choose the lucky ones, but Jason insists that only those valuable for reproduction should remain in the end. Yedlin decides to use Carrie. He tells her that Jason has decided to leave her to be torn apart by the Abbeys because of her inability to have children. The doctor convinces her of his truth and suggests she eliminate the traitor. Many years ago, while planning the construction of a new world, David Pilcher adopted a child to make him the heir to everything. But before signing the papers, the professor meets the boy's mother, Carrie. She was the one who gave her son to the professor, who later named him Jason. While flipping through his fiancée's personal file, Jason finds a secret folder where he discovers that his fiancée is actually his biological mother. At that very moment, Carrie enters the room. The calm conversation escalates into a scuffle and a fight. Finally, a gunshot is heard in the room. Jason recalls the first time he saw Carrie, how she was introduced to the new world, and how he promised she would always be safe. But now the once-in-love young people are on the floor, in pools of crimson. As Jason fades, Carrie takes his hand to stay by his side. The female Abby regains consciousness and signals to her kin, gathering them around her. Jason is brought to the hospital, and Theo prepares him for surgery. Meanwhile, in the forest, the Abbeys are preparing for a final assault on the city. The residents are being prepared for evacuation into cryocapsules, but most townspeople linger around the hospital, waiting for news about their leader. After several hours of surgery, Theo announces Jason's death to everyone. The doctor assures the people that the plan remains unchanged. They will all be saved soon. CJ hands Dr. Yedlin the list Jason had made. He suggests following the old plan to avoid panic and save precious time. Registration for the capsules begins, and the first to enter are women and children. Those not on the first list are asked to wait at home for their turn, but many suspect they will never be called. Even among the children, there are excess. One of these extras is Frank, who had once openly told Theo that he didn't want to have children. Xander also doesn't receive an invitation. He realizes this is Yedlin's personal revenge for taking his wife. The closer the Abbeys get to the fence, the more aggressive they become. Their movements are watched by the female leader, standing above the rest. Watching the screen, Theo realizes that the fence is on the verge of being breached. The doctor decides to record one last message for future generations in which he urges humanity not to repeat David Pilcher's experiments. Such endeavors only lead to dire consequences. To somehow fix the situation, Dr. Yedlin plans to inject himself with 3 strains of dangerous viruses involuntarily surrendered to the Abbeys. This is how he intends to wipe out the terrible mutant species. Those who didn't get a place in the capsules begin to panic and search for alternative ways out. Riots break out in the city. Only Xander and Frank calmly accept their fate, sitting in a small street bar. Theo arrives to pick up the boys and take them to the departure point, but the road is blocked by 2 young men with a burning bottle and a firm decision to steal the car. Xander manages to calm the boys down, and the group leaves. On the way, Theo picks up another passenger, his intern Arlene. Yedlin returns to the lab to inject himself with the virus strains and head for the wall. But there he is met by Carrie, who asks to take on this mission herself. After Jason's death and the news that he was her son, she no longer wants to run from her fate. Learning that she has already injected herself with the viruses, Theo agrees to leave with the others. As a parting gesture, he gives her one more vial, which will numb her pain during the encounter with the Abbeys. Before the capsules are launched, Theo wishes the travelers a safe journey. He admits that he doesn't know what awaits them in the future, but hopes it will be better than the present. People take their places as the city slowly comes to a standstill in the face of danger. CJ is supposed to be the last to take his place, but his capsule malfunctions and the man sees his wife, who has been dead for several hundred years. Nevertheless, CJ decides to stay behind, hoping that one day he can change the world. Carrie opens the wall and steps outside the city, into the land where the Abbeys will live for many centuries. And so the series ends. Hey guys, today we have a recap of the next episodes of the show. Magne and Vidar are lying unconscious on the pier when an ambulance pulls up. One of the paramedics rushes to Magne with a defibrillator and begins to administer aid. After receiving the shock, Magne instantly regains consciousness and emits a powerful wave that throws the man several meters away. While the second medic tries to help his buddy, Magne approaches Vidar's body. Vidar opens his eyes and whispers the words of a threat. Magne will die before the new moon comes. The lad runs away. At this time in the nursing home, one of the residents, Wotan Wagner, complains to the orderly Halvor about the broken wheelchair. Magne runs into the mountains. He is still shaken by the battle and turns to the bird flying above, blaming it for everything that has happened to him. Suddenly, Magne finds himself in the netherworld, and before him stands the ancient sorceress Volva, who takes the form of Isolde. She reminds him that he must now obtain weapons and find friends, for the other gods will surely come to his aid. Volva asks him not to come here because the giants might kill her too. Then she scoops up something from the glowing bowl and blows it in the guy's face. Magne is immediately alone on the mountain. Annoyed, Vidar rushes to his house and tells Ran and Saxa about the battle that took place. In the meantime, a group of young people are hanging out at a table in a street cafe when Magne comes running to them looking for the cashier. No one knows where she is, but everyone raves about Laurit's speech at the feast. Fjord then returns home and announces that he has not killed Gry. Not only that, he's going to leave home and live with the girl he loves. The boy does not want to take part in the coming battle. When he arrives at Gry's house, he announces his separation from his family. Magne reminds Lauritz of the stories of Ragnarok, but the brother does not take these ancient stories seriously. To prove his new identity, Magne bends a metal bat in front of his brother. Lauritz asks for time to think over what he has said. The next day, the head of the Adda police appears on TV and announces that an investigation has begun into Utul Industries, for which a well-known expert is coming to town. Lauritz is watching the broadcast, devouring food. Suddenly, Turid arrives, and she's surprised by his son's voraciousness. In his room, Magne observes an obvious change in his appearance. His muscles are getting bigger and he's getting even stronger. Later, Turid invites the boys to celebrate their father's birthday and shows them a photo of them together. The family goes to their father's grave, where Lauritz makes the statement that the father would obviously be proud of a son who looks like a woman and uses makeup. Here, Magne looks like his father, but Lauritz looks like he's from a different family. Turid smoothes over the unpleasant conversation. On their way home, they meet Erich, and he informs them that by the school board's decision, Magne can return to school. At that moment, Turid asks for help. The car won't start. So Magne pushes the car to the car repair shop, where they are greeted by Harry, the mechanic. And there, Magne gets a clue where he can get the hammer. In the meantime, Vidar is watching a report on TV about the barrels found, while the women take the ancient weapon down. Saxa is annoyed by her refusal to take her in, since she is a member of the family. Agreeing to this, Vidar takes her to the factory and shows her the production when suddenly police arrive. Vidar acts arrogant and defiant. But the girl smooths over her father's behavior at a crucial moment, apologizing for the problems she has caused and promising to do everything she can to solve them. Her father has to admit that she's right. Meanwhile, Magne makes a drawing of Thor's hammer. Turid in the meantime comes to the store and apologizes to Venke for the words she spoke. And the woman asks her to inform his son that he will meet the god on the bridge, for which he must remember Volva's ancient prophecy. Hearing these words, Magne runs to the bridge. He memorizes the first words of the prophecy and tries to read them to passers-by. But everyone just passes by, except Iman, who takes Wotan out for a walk. Magne reads a few lines and the girl continues the text. They go home to Magne and the girl tells him how Wenke activated her powers, saying she was special. Then she tells him to find the chief warrior and help him. Meanwhile, Lauritz arrives at the grill cafe and meets the waiter. He unmistakably identifies the guy as gay and shows his sympathy. Meanwhile, Magne tries to find out about Iman's powers, but the girl can't recall anything supernatural. Back at home, Lauritz shares his hopes with his mother and informs her that young people are coming over tonight to have a party. At this moment, they hear very distinctive noises from Magne's room. Mother and son smile. Apparently, Magne has found himself a girlfriend. But it turns out that the boy, demonstrating his strength, has to put Iman on a chair and lift her up with one hand while she bangs on the ceiling and screams. In the evening, fun reigns in the turret house, to which Gry and Fjord also come. And Iman finally finds her power. She can make anyone do what she wants. And she demonstrates it on one of the guys who, at her command, brings her a drink by moving on his knees. She seems to be the embodiment of the goddess of love and fertility, Freya. Laurit's new mate never arrives, and the distraught lad complains to his mother, he's just ugly. Tipsa Turret reveals the truth to her son. In the morning, Iman and Magne arrive at the workshop, and the girl uses her powers to force Harry to make a hammer from Magne's drawing. In the meantime, Turret goes to Vidar and confesses to him that on the one night they once spent together, she became pregnant. And now is the time when Lauritz needs a man's support very much. And Vidar, thanks to woman. In the evening, on his way home, Magne sees Vidar embracing Lauritz. At night, Turret tries to justify herself to Lauritz. She has never regretted giving birth to him, and she won't mind if the boy gets to know his real father better, which Magne dislikes very much. In Jotunheim, Ran trains with her fighting bow, reminding Saxa of her spear. But the girl is completely immersed in the business of the factory. At this point, Vidar informs her of his newfound son, which causes Ran to object. Giants cannot have children by mortals, but Vidar cites fate. And Magne breaks the news to Iman. He then learns that the girl was born in Sri Lanka but grew up in a Norwegian family. She boasts that she can get anything she wants with her powers, which provokes Magne's condemnation. The powers were not given to get new clothes or cheat shopkeepers. At this point, Harry brings the hammer. Lauritz comes to Vidar and he offers to take a motorcycle ride. Meanwhile, Magne and Iman are going to test the hammer, for the real one must always return to Odin. But the hammer just takes off. Making a stop in the mountain, Vidar tries to ferret out something about Magne, but Lauritz gets it right away. Magne retrieves his hammer but cannot understand why it does not work. Meanwhile, Saxa continues to investigate the company's affairs and makes a statement to reporters. Meanwhile, a company of young people are sitting in a grill bar and watching the news. The guys are shocked by the admission that it's dangerous to drink tap water because that's what they were drinking. Fjord hears Saxa's apology and leaves. One of the girls suggests protesting against the U-Tools who have mucked up the fjord. Turret is writing a note to her sons to not drink the tap water when Lauritz and Vidar enter the house. The boy is thrilled, his father has given him a motorcycle. In the meantime, Ran is looking at the pictures in the family album and suddenly brushes away a tear. At this moment, Vidar enters the house and announces that he is ready to take in his new son, which prompts a harsh protest from Ran. Saxa is struck by the abundance of emotion, for Ren has never been jealous of her husband. In the evening, Magne goes to the grill bar and Saxa arrives there as well. Seeing her, the guy pulls out a knife, but the girl just provokes him. At the end of their conversation, they come to the conclusion that their families have lost their minds. Cisterns of drinking water arrive in Edda, and Fjord receives an invitation from Ran to talk. The woman has arrived at Gry's house and is waiting outside. He listens to his mother's account about the changes in the family and refuses to call Rand his mother. They are merely feigning their relationship. He has no intention of going back and wants nothing to do with the firm. Angry, Rand sees the Sayer family and tries to run them over with her car. But Magne manages to react and pushes his loved ones away. Rand apologizes, pretending to have lost control, but Magne doesn't believe her. He grabs the hammer and runs to Wenke. The old woman is frightened. The giants will kill her if they see them together. She's amazed at Magne's attempt to make the hammer because you can't just get it. She promises to tell him how to forge the real Mjolnir. After all, the giants have an ancient weapon with which they can kill anyone. She begins the story of the eternal fire of the ancient gods but notices Ran and hides in the building, promising Magne to tell him everything when he meets her on the mountain. Lauritz comes to Jotunheim and is treated to mead. Vidar tells him that the lad is not human and gives him the heart of a deer he has harvested for him. Lauritz eats the meat and visions of ancient giants flash before him. Vidar grabs his hand and shoves it into the fire. The boy screams, but as he pulls his hand out, the burn disappears right before his eyes. He is now invulnerable. Rand sees this and becomes enraged. While the spouses are quarreling, Lauritz goes to the bathroom and after washing his face sees in the mirror the ancient scoffer, half-brother of Odin and father of the serpent Midgardsorm, Loki. and he understands he is his incarnation. Back in the room, he hears Rand say that the cashier is really Vulva, and she's going to kill her before Magni gets the hammer. Meanwhile, Magni comes for Lauritz at Utelheim. He asks his brother to return home, and he reluctantly agrees and tells him of Rand's intentions. Magni runs to Wenki. Meanwhile, she closes up store and goes home. But she sees Rand's car and takes off into the sky as a bird. Magni sees her fly away and is glad everything has turned out to be alright. But suddenly Rand draws her bow and pierces the bird with her arrow. The bird falls near the orphanage. The wounded woman reaches Wotan, hands him her medallion and asks him to help Magni. Magni rushes to her, takes her head in his hands, but the woman turns to ash. Magni cries over what was just his mentor, then runs to Rand's car and threatens to kill her. But the woman is very calm. She reassures the witnesses that the boy is simply sick. Iman pulls him away with difficulty. At night, Magni has a dream in which Isolde begs him not to give up. In the morning, the radio announces that the young people of the town are planning a protest. Turid speaks of Magni's intemperance. You should not shout at the school principal in the middle of the street. To this, Magni reminds her of the attempted murder of their family. But Turid is more concerned about the irrepressible appetite of Lauritz, who boasts to his brother of his newly acquired invulnerability. Magni asks to prove his loyalty and to help break into the Utel's house because he thinks the eternal fire burns in their hearth. Lauritz promises to help. Posters and appeals are hung all over Edda to shut down the harmful Utel's production, while Fjord and Gry bring her father to the hospital. The girl is grateful to her boyfriend for his support and is delighted when the boy agrees to spend Saturday night with her family. Meanwhile, Wotan examines Wenki's locket and puts it on himself, and at that moment he is awakened to who he really is, the king of the gods, Odin, who sacrificed a night to know eternal wisdom and is able to see the present, past, and the future. He is Thor's father and Loki's twin. Wotan begins to behave intelligently and calls corpseman Halvor a dark elf, which puzzles the man. Meanwhile, Magni continues his training and studies Scandinavian myths, and then sends a message to Iman that he intends to go to Utelheim to forge a hammer there. In the meantime, Turid and Lauritz go to the store, and while Turid is shopping, the boy tortures the man he meets, Erich, with questions about Loki. He tells him that Loki was the father of the snake Midgard's Orm, which leads him to believe that Loki was the world's first transgender man. Saxa and Vidar arrive at the square where people are getting clean water in canisters. The girl is convinced that they should show their closeness to the people and then everything will work out, especially since the youth protests are planned. That's where Turid and Lauritz meet them and the latter asks to see Vidar. Saxa goes to the factory to attend to business. When Turid arrives home, she tells them that Lauritz has gone to Utelheim, which angers Magni. They had a deal. Apparently his brother has chosen their side. Meanwhile, Lauritz watches Vidar cook and confesses that he would like to come here more often. When he returns home, he is not given a warm welcome by his brother. But Lauritz earns forgiveness by showing Magni the entrance key to Utelheim he received from Vidar. Meanwhile, there is a dinner party at Gry's house. The father makes a lot of jokes and thanks everyone for what they have been in his life. Gry does not understand what's going on but is glad for a good evening. In the evening, the brothers enter the Utel house when no one is there. Magni sticks his hammer into the burning hearth, with absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And when nothing happens, Vidar walks through the door. Tripping over the backpack left by Magni, Utel pulls out the hammer. Magni has to come out and admits it's his thing. Vidar realizes what they were up to and kicks the guys out. When they return home, they find Erich at the table, who tells them that Mjolnir was forged by stunted creatures that people called dwarfs. Loki became Odin's sibling by swearing on his blood, and when their blood mixed, he became half god, half giant. At night, Ren tries to persuade Vidar to forget about Laura's deception, and the latter promises to kill the boy. In the morning, Wotan gives blood and admits to Iman that he is Odin. The girl summons Magni, who at that moment is invited to the protest against the Utels. Fjord, who is immediately present, refuses to go with everyone else. Magni arrives at the nursing home where Wotan greets him but addresses Lauritz rather sternly. He does not believe the boy and tells him to leave despite Magni's attempt to convince him otherwise. Loki is a traitor by nature, he cannot be trusted. Lauritz is about to leave, but then he sees a table with the blood tests. He tricks the nurse, pulls out Wotan's blood, and injects a portion into his own vein. In the meantime, Fuhr watches the protest taking place at the factory gate. Gry goes there with him and supports Magne, believing that it is to his credit. Saxa urges her father to respond, at which point Fuhr joins the protesters. He steps forward and makes a speech acknowledging the Utul's guilt and promising to do whatever he can to rectify the situation. After all, we all share the same planet. Looking at this, Lauritz is on the fence. Should he go to Vidar or support his brother? At that moment, Gry receives a text message and the girl runs away. Fuhr rushes after her, and Lauritz stops Vidar's car and tells him that he wants to go with him. He gets in his car and makes an indecent gesture to everyone. Gry and Fuhr rush to the hospital where the girl's mother tells them about the father's suicide. The man swallowed all the sleeping pills and could not be saved. Vidar and Lauritz arrive at Utelheim. The father tells the boy about how the people used to worship them and carry gifts. He demonstrates to the boy that he can change his appearance. So when he supposedly grew old, the place was taken by his son. Vidar was willing to do anything for him, even making him invulnerable. The truth is, there is a weapon that will kill anyone. Giants do not forgive treachery. Suddenly, Magni bursts into the house. He will not let his brother be hurt. Armed with the axe, Vidar rushes at the lad. A fierce fight ensues, with the enemies exchanging blows. While delivering the next blow, Vidar drives the axe into the wall. Magni pushes the man away, and he lands on the edge of the axe sticking out of the wall. His body turns to ash, which terrifies Magni. Magni suffers deeply from all that has happened and feels guilty about Vidar's murder and the loss of Lauritz, but he cannot confess this to his mother, who is immersed in a relationship with Erich. But she is shaken by the news of Vidar's death. The mother sympathizes with her son, and he casts hateful glances at his brother. Gry offers her condolences to Fuhr, but the latter stuns the girl with a confession that he did not love his father. Meanwhile, Ran urges Saxa to take revenge, though the daughter is cautious about what has happened. They do not know exactly what has happened, they must be careful. But Ran is fixated on hating Lauritz and plans to take revenge on him specifically. But for now, they announce that Vidar died of a heart attack. The rules of Utul Industries state that the rights of ownership should pass to the eldest son, but Saxa intends to usurp the position. Exhausted, Magne goes to Fuhr and confesses to the murder of his father. By the rules of the ancient world, he must give satisfaction to a relative of the deceased, but the younger Utul refuses to take revenge. Upon returning home, Magne discovers forbidding signs on the entrance to his brother's room. Lauritz accuses him of murder. His father was merely going to teach him a lesson. In the meantime, Wotan and Iman arrive at Harry's workshop for the old man's baby carriage, but he cannot do anything about the worn-out mechanism. Magne arrives there as well, and after hearing congratulations on his victory, sharply objects. He has killed a man, and he refuses to go to war. Distraught Lauritz tells the barman that the doctors have discovered a tapeworm parasite inside him, and he begins treatment. In the meantime, Gry and Fuhr are eating ice cream on the porch of the barber shop, and the girl admits that her mother intends to move from Edda to the big city. Fuhr decides to go with her. He's not going to attend Vidar's funeral. Turid and Magne are summoned to the school, where the boy is given permission to take his final exam and is assigned a topic: Scandinavian myths. After that, Iman tries to convince Magne to return to the battle group. After all, there is no war without casualties. Besides Vidar, there are still giants left, among them his brother. Hearing about Lauritz, Magne loses his temper, and his brother, watching the conversation from afar, sees lights sparking everywhere. Saxa takes on the firm's business with determination and one day talks to Turid, convincing her not to mix emotion and work. Satisfied, the woman thanks the girl for her understanding. Furious, Iman goes to the sports club, where she notices Harry. The girl challenges him to a fight. The guy dismisses it with a joke. Iman gives him a good kicking, but falling down and swallowing blood, the boy gets up again and again. He never gives up. Later, Iman leads him to the old man. She has found the fighter. Apparently, his soul used to live in the body of Tyr, a god of war known for his courage and strength, who lost his arm in a battle with the wolf Fenrir, sacrificing himself to save his friends. Meanwhile, the youths discussed a protest against the util factories and invite Magne to participate, not noticing Saxa, who enters the cafe. The guy is uncomfortable in front of her, but he doesn't know how to stop the conversation. It is Saxa herself who does this. Magne apologizes for losing a father and the girl accepts the apology. At home, Lauritz takes his medicine and remembers Vidar bitterly. The mother tries to reconcile the brothers, and while Lauritz agrees to hug his brother, he is twisted in violent pain. The boy is taken to the hospital and the doctors are shocked to see the size of the parasite inside the man. He undergoes surgery but the worm survives. The doctors intend to examine it because they have never seen anything like it before, but Lauritz intends to keep it. That evening, Fjord and Saxa meet in a secluded spot to discuss the matter. Fjord speaks of Magne's guilt and of his intention to leave with Gry. His sister accuses him of cowardice and she leaves. The day of Vidar's funeral arrives. Magne announces that he's not going to the funeral, but his mother asks him to do so for Lauritz's sake. At this point, the boy leaves the room. He has changed his image again and now looks very much like his father. Magne runs away, unable to see his brother. He comes to the mountain and asks for his powers. He has killed the man and lost his brother. Receiving no answer, Magne goes to the church, where he's rebuked by Lauritz, who sits in the pew of the Util family. The inhabitants of Edda sing psalms, remembering Vidar, without noticing the storm that is coming upon the city. The priest reads a scripture recalling the son's duty to his father, and this is heard by Fjord, who does come to the funeral. Suddenly there is a thunderclap. Magne prays for his powers to be taken away, and Fjord goes to his father's coffin. And the moment the coffin is carried out of the altar, there is a tremendous thunderclap, and all the panes of glass fly out of the windows. Later, Gry and her mother pack up their belongings. The girl waits for Fjord, but he does not come. Instead, it's Magne who comes to say goodbye to the girl. She then goes up to Fjord's house to fetch him. But suddenly, he refuses to go. There is something more precious than her. Seeing the change in his eyes, Gry runs away and asks her mother to leave quickly. The younger Util goes to the top of the mountain and pulls out the ancient Vidar world axe buried there. The monstrous serpent Midgardsorm is the spawn of Loki. Thor defeats the serpent in the last battle of Ragnarok. Magne wakens from a terrible dream. Isolde looks at him with a reproachful look. He falls down the stairs. He cannot see a thing. Turid brings him his spectacles. Magne understands what has happened. The strength has failed him. That same morning, Saxa admonishes Ren. The woman is abusing alcohol, and Ren wonders whether the girl is indifferent to Vidar's death. The girl nods in agreement. She does not feel anything. She hurries to the factory, but when she enters the floor, she finds Fjord at the desk. He has assumed the duties of the supervisor according to the statute. He exposes Saxa and removes the photo with Gry. Magne goes to Wotan, but he chases the weakling away. Neither Iman nor Harry recognize him anymore. Grieving Lauritz goes to Utilheim, where Rand demands his key back and confirms that Vidar intended to kill him. Meanwhile, Magne is preparing for the exam when Erich makes a remark. The guy puts too much emphasis on this story everyone already knows. It would be much better if you looked at those events from a modern perspective. Magne objects. If good triumphs over evil, it becomes evil itself. Erich is pleased. The moral of the myths is very interesting stuff. At this point, Iman discovers her English grades and becomes indignant. Her language skills are perfect. The grades are all wrong. The girl goes to Ran and uses her powers to get her grades corrected. Meanwhile, Turid discovers that Lauritz has some kind of monster in the aquarium which she finds disgusting. Magne learns that Iman has used her powers to change the grades. He reminds her that the powers are not for personal use. But the girl retorts, he's nobody now, and she does not care what he thinks. Turid demands that the creature be removed from the house, but she is forced to agree to her son's wish when he reminds her of the loss of his father. On his way home, Magne witnesses Harry beating up a guy who wanted to cheat and did not pay for gas. He intervenes but again receives a reminder that his opinion is no longer valued. Later he asks Lauritz to forgive him, for he sincerely wanted to protect his brother. He renounced his powers and they were taken away. The brothers embrace, but Loki refuses to help in the battle. Fjord begins to run the firm's affairs with an iron fist and fires Turid for personal reasons. Upon learning this, Magne rushes to the factory and attacks Fjord, oblivious to the fact that his powers no longer exist. Utul ends up beating him and leaving him lying in the parking lot, telling him he doesn't even deserve to die. The battered lad goes to Wotan and asks for permission to rejoin the ranks of the fighters on the condition that he won't kill, but he's reminded that there is no other way of doing it. After Fjord's return, Ran takes his side, especially since Magne has lost his powers. Now the company is the first priority. Saxa is against the new policy, but nobody listens to her. Magne's new sympathizer Signy urges the guy to keep fighting Util Industries while Saxa convinces Lauritz to vote against Fjord. After all, he's a member of the family. In exchange, she offers him the key to Utilheim and money. In the evening, Lauritz comes to the Utils and Fjord has to greet his brother. Meanwhile, Magne goes for a run and sees the installation of the stone on Isolde's tomb. After dinner, Fjord inquires about Lauritz's expectations. He reminds him that Lauritz is also a giant. Fjord is willing to buy his vote because he has much more money than Saxa does. Ran takes Lauritz home and warns him to stay away from her family. Lauritz scoffs. Even as a bastard, he is related to Vidar, while the others are not really family. The whole thing is a farce to those around them as they are barren. Enraged, Ran follows him into the house and attacks Lauritz. Magne tries to help but to no avail. Ran openly promises to destroy his family for the powers have left Magne, but suddenly Turid comes home and Ran leaves. Magne decides to do what he can to win the war and returns to Wotan to regain his powers. Wotan reminds him that his greatest weapon is Mjolnir, his only chance against the giants. Magne agrees to lie to Lauritz and get the key to Utilheim. The team of warriors go to the Util's factory as Odin reminds them shortly before that they have everything they need to make the hammer, Volva's feather and Ran's arrowhead. At the mention of the dwarf's name, Halvor enters the room. All that remains is to find the eternal flame, which can only be found somewhere in the factory. Once inside, the team goes to the old warehouse, but suddenly they see guards. Wotan, Odin, is summoned to divert their attention while they forge the hammer. The old man comes out into the light and pretends he can't walk. The guards are puzzled, but remembering their orders to guard this building particularly closely, they take the old man to the gatehouse, reporting the incident to Fjord. Harry intends to break the lock on the warehouse, but Magne pulls out the key he snatched from Lauritz, lying that he intends to impress Signy by hanging a protest banner in the Util warehouse. Once inside, the team begins looking for the fire, but there is no such thing in sight. Magne reads the words of the saga and everyone understands there must be a dungeon. It must be nearby, and while Iman stays behind to keep watch, the others descend into the cellar and find the ancient forge with the eternal fire blazing. That's when Fjord arrives at the factory. And while the team is working on the hammer, Iman comes out to fight. Under the blows of the sledgehammer, the ancient iron, the feather and the tip of the giant's weapon are fused together. Meanwhile, upstairs there's a deadly battle, and Iman begins to suffer defeat. Harry asks to finish the job, and he goes up to rescue his friend. All that remains is to chop the hilt, but Halvor has never done such a thing and it comes out too short. But Magne approves of the dwarf's work, cools the finished hammer and hurries upstairs. Harry orders everyone to run and restrains Fjord himself, but the man throwing him back against a door slams it shut, amputating a part of his arm. Iman returns to help, ordering Magne to remove the hammer from the factory. The police arrive and now Halvor goes to them, diverting attention from Magne. The boy gets out of the factory and goes home where he's greeted by his mother and brother congratulating Magne on his birthday, which he has completely forgotten about. The media reports about a break-in at the factory, a protest banner posted, and the arrest of 4 people. Magne admits that he too was part of the group, and contrary to his fears, Turid takes it calmly. Without even unpacking the presents, Magne goes to the mountain and tries to abandon Mjolnir, but the strength never returns. Magne calls Iman, the hammer doesn't work, and she tells him to do whatever it takes to succeed. He returns home where Turid asks the boys to go get burgers. They go to a cafe where Signy approves of the action, and Lauritz tries to get the bartender's attention. At this time there is a report on TV about the impending closure of the Util factories because it has been proven that the production has polluted the environment. In addition, tax evasion has been revealed. Saxa also listens to this report. She tries to rectify the situation and asks for a press conference. Meanwhile, the director of the orphanage fires Iman and Halvor, which provokes protests from the residents. Wonton gives a fiery speech thanking the real heroes and sings the national anthem in their honor. Magna's trying to figure out what to do with Mjolnir when Turit asks her to bring Laurit's things. She's afraid to go into his room because of the horrible pet. Confused, the boy goes into the room and sees a nightmarish worm, a veritable spawn of hell. Lauritz arrives at the cafe where Iman and Harry are resting and catches the bartender in the arms of the expert. The disappointed guy walks away. Meanwhile, Fuhr announces that he's moving his production to Asia where governments are more loyal to business. Turid goes to work at the store for the first time that day. Meanwhile, many residents of Edda are afraid that they might lose their jobs and homes. Lauritz, who has given up hope of finding love, feeds his worm while Magne rereads the ancient tales of Thor again and again. And suddenly it hits him. Thor was created by lightning. And then there is a news announcement on TV that the Norwegian government is backing down on closing the U-Tools factories as it realized that it will lead to massive job losses. Besides, the owners have promised to fix the spill. Fuhr celebrates his victory while Magne is outraged. His rage electrifies the air around him. He then hears a knocking sound coming from his room. The boy rushes upstairs, sees that the window is open and the hammer is twitching. He picks up Mjolnir, and at that moment Lauritz enters the room too. Lauritz realizes that his brother lied to him. He crafted a weapon that can kill him too. Without answering, Magne goes out into the storm, extends the hammer to the sky, and awakens Mjolnir, holding it in the air until lightning strikes it. His powers return. In Jotunheim, Fuhr and Ran learn that Saxa has given the key to Lauritz and punish her for her treachery. After that, they leave to kill the boy. Magne goes to Jotunheim to face Fuhr but finds Saxa beaten. She sees the hammer and he suddenly feels sorry for the wounded girl. But she does not tell him anything about her family's intention to kill Lauritz. Meanwhile, Lauritz is home alone and hears the enemies approach the house. Saxa tries to persuade Magne to act together while Lauritz hides in the kitchen. Ran does not notice him. Magne understands Saxa's intentions and Ran hears the sound the worm makes in the room. Thinking she has put Magne's vigilance to sleep, Saxa rushes for the hammer, but Magne is ahead of her and is ready to drop the hammer on her head. Meanwhile, Fuhr catches Lauritz. In Jotunheim, a spark flashes between the young men and they grow close. Lauritz begs for mercy and declares that he alone possesses a weapon that can kill Magne. As Fuhr and Ren are about to leave, Magne appears on the street and attacks them with the Mjolnir. The hammer hits the U-Tools car and it explodes. Magne picks up Lauritz, who is battered but still alive, and he promises to forgive his brother for deceiving him. In the morning, he carries his creepy pet to the shore of the morass and after kissing it, lets it go free. He wishes his creature to go big and strong and to avenge all his enemies. Ren and Fuhr watch this from the shore. The show has had mixed reviews, from good to outright bad. But there's one thing that the viewers agree on: this story is quite compelling. The problem of today, environment, is organically integrated into the plot as one of the key elements of the story. And of course it's impossible to stay indifferent to the views of the harsh but so beautiful Scandinavian nature. Thanks to the high ratings, the show has been reviewed for a third season this year, 2023. Sunny Atlanta. The 13th day of quarantine in the city is on the brink of extinction. Panic and horror surround those who have managed to survive. No one understands how it will all end, but how did it all begin? 2 weeks before the current events. An ordinary day in Atlanta does not portend anything unusual. The city is bustling with life. Elementary school teacher, Caddy Frank, brings her students on a field trip to the local hospital. At the same time, on one of the floors of the clinic, Dr. Sanders finds herself in quarantine due to an unknown illness. The woman remembers that shortly before the first symptoms appeared, she had contact with a patient from Syria who was sick. In another part of the city, Jenna also feels unwell, but not because of the virus. She is anxious about moving in with her boyfriend Alex. At the last moment, Jenna backs out and confesses to a cop that she is not ready to rush. Alex is unable to sort things out with his girlfriend because he is called to the department. There, a major meeting is being planned, where the police are asked to prepare for a difficult situation in the city. There is a suspicion that the Syrian brought an unknown virus to Atlanta and quarantine may need to be declared. Dr. Sabina Lomers speaks to the police officers. She also talks about the threat of an epidemic but assures the audience that nothing serious is happening. Another main character who will face difficult trials is Teresa. The pregnant woman visits her mother's shop, where her mother reminds her that she is expected at the adoption agency, which is looking for parents for her daughter. The reminder upsets Teresa, but her boyfriend reassures her and assures her that he has everything under control. They will run away tonight and no one will be able to take their child. Caddy's students perform for the patients, but the teacher is concerned about why Dr. Sanders did not meet them. The doctor on duty pretends not to know about the colleague's fate and does not tell the teacher about the infected doctor's condition. Caddy begins to suspect something strange is happening soon. When they were about to leave, the doctors announce that the children will have to stay a little longer. The hospital is under quarantine and everyone must undergo a thorough check. Dr. Lorms arranges a secret meeting with Alex and asks him to take the situation under personal control. She admits that she has extensive experience but has never encountered such a virus before. According to the expert, the danger threatens not only Atlanta but the entire world. On-call officers are sent to the Zero patient's home, from where the doctors believe the epidemic began. Cops protect themselves as much as possible with shields and gloves and convince the patient's relatives that they should also take safety measures. The boy is in serious condition and is taken to the hospital despite his attempt to escape. Caddy realizes that her son and his friend Thomas have run away. The teacher goes in search of the boys just as the Zero patient is being brought in. The woman notices the patient but refuses to leave the corridor until her students are found. Officer Jake Riley volunteers to help Caddy. Together they search for the missing boys, and the pair witnesses an even more terrifying sight: the bodies of Dr. Sanders and her fiancé. Fresh news reports indicate that the situation has worsened. The Zero patient died after a severe period. The cops also learn about what happened to Dr. Sanders. But more frightening to the police is the fact that all the emigrants' relatives were also infected. This means the virus spreads very quickly and kills the host within 48 hours. Caddy finds the boys in a rat lab. It seems the danger is over, but the doctor informs her that the quarantine is extended for 2 days and no one will be able to leave the hospital earlier. During the report, Dr. Connor informs the police that they have identified the virus. He assures them that traces of the pathogen were found in the Zero patient's personal belongings, and it all looks like an attempt to deliberately cause an infection. Teresa arrives at the train station to leave for her boyfriend's relatives, but unexpectedly, the train refuses to take new passengers and passes by. Upon learning that Jake is locked in the hospital, Alex directly asks Dr. Lorms about what is happening. The expert admits that a border is being established around the area that cannot be crossed for several days. By evening, panic begins in the city. People are surrounded by an iron fence, and many find themselves separated from their loved ones. Teresa learns that she and Xander are also on opposite sides of the cordon, and the girl will have to decide what to do next. Despite the measures taken, the number of infected continues to grow. At night, experts conduct an autopsy on the Zero patient and discover that the virus affects all vital organs. Furthermore, there is evidence that it takes only 48 hours from infection to the end. There is no chance of recovery, and if a vaccine is not found soon, the world faces serious trouble. Alex manages to contact Jenna and asks her to stay in a safe place. The girl decides to lock herself in her office. Returning to her mother's shop, Teresa calls Xander and tells him that she is okay. Despite this, the boy promises to find a way and get to her through the dangerous fence. Jenna is joined by her colleagues who did not manage to leave the city. Meanwhile, the girl's fiancé receives a warning that he should not break the rules due to personal attachments. Jake is asked to help the doctors sort through the belongings of the sick to find their relatives. Examining the Zero patient's mobile phone, the guy notices a frightening detail. A day before his death, the young man communicated with a blonde woman who had not been known about before. Jake immediately reports his findings to his colleagues, and the department decides to send a squad to search for the stranger. The police find the blonde's address, but her parents say she has not been seen since yesterday. Another emergency meeting is called, and everyone is ordered to find the girl within hours. While waiting for the doctor, Caddy listens to a news broadcast talking about the Zero patient and the doctors who contracted the virus from him. For the first time, the woman notices discrepancies, but her thoughts are interrupted by Dr. Connor, who assures the teacher that everything will end soon and she and the children will be able to go home. Leaving, Caddy still decides to ask about her suspicions. She was surprised that Dr. Sanders died before the Syrian who supposedly infected her, but Connor avoids answering, muttering something about differences in immunity. Jake is sent to find the girl, and the authorities hope to hide the fact that the infected person is behind the fence. But it is no longer possible to help the blonde. The cops find her in serious condition in the apartment of old friends. The blonde and her friends are taken to the quarantine zone. But Lorms admits to Alex that the situation is too serious. The virus spreads faster than they could have anticipated. Alex calls his fiancée to reassure her, but he does not dare to tell her what the city is facing. The police have been ordered to strengthen the cordon and use weapons in case of violations. More people with symptoms of infection continue to arrive at the hospital. Among them, Jake sees many children, but the doctor says that this is not the worst. The hospital is running out of free beds and soon there will be nowhere to isolate the sick. In addition to the bad news, the officer has an unpleasant task. Connor asks him to cremate the bodies to prevent outbreaks of other diseases. Another problem for the authorities is Leo Green, a local journalist. He continues to publish panic-inducing videos, and Lormes instructs Alex to stop the provocateur. The cop tries to negotiate with Leo, but the journalist is sure that the authorities are hiding something and he must get to the truth. A few minutes later, a new video from Green appears online, this time attracting the president's attention. Jenna's colleagues realize that they will not have enough food until the end of the quarantine, and the men decide to go to the store. The girl does not like this idea, but the majority votes to take the risk. Teresa's mother also takes the situation lightly. The girl sees her mother raising prices on essential goods to make a profit. To entertain the children, Caddy takes them to the roof. This gives everyone a chance to breathe fresh air, but the girl does not have time to relax. Thomas runs away, ignoring the teacher's cries. The girl finds the student on the stairs, next to a sick man. Drops fall on the boy, and it becomes clear that he is now infected. Thomas is sent to isolation, and the teacher blames herself. She tells the doctor that she promised the boy's father to take care of Thomas, but let him down. The men return with full bags of groceries, but Jenna does not let them into the office. She notices that her friend took off his gloves, meaning he could have brought the virus on his hands. A customer who was charged too much brings her friends. They raid the store, but Teresa's mother is saved by Jake's appearance, who received orders to patrol the city. Caddy finds Thomas's ward empty. She catches up with the boy at the hospital exit, and his father refuses to leave his son in the quarantine zone. The doctors have no choice but to let the patient go. Alex's pleas have no effect on Leo, and in pursuit of a hot story, he allows his colleagues to leave the closed area. He is not even frightened by the fact that one of the girls has symptoms of the disease. Alex and Jake manage to meet secretly on neutral territory. Both guys are nervous, but they have to work together. Leo Green tells the whole world how to leave the closed area. The police have to hold back the crowd while workers cut the ladder. This leads to serious riots, and the cops have to open fire to kill. To prevent such incidents, the government shuts down the internet and phone communication, depriving everyone of the only joy, talking to each other. Caddy accidentally enters a closed room and learns the truth about the number of victims. Among them are her students. At the same time, Jenna also tries to get to the truth, and she assembles a radio phone to call Alex. The girl has to climb to the roof to get the antenna, where she meets Sam, a technician who hid on the roof to avoid infection. Alex changes partners and goes on night duty. In the middle of the night, he notices an intruder and asks him to stop. The criminal turns out to be Xander, who is trying to enter the danger zone to his fiancée, but the cop does not let him do it and pulls the trigger. The bullet turns out to be rubber, and Xander is simply taken to the hospital. The officer visits him and apologizes, but warns that he will do the same thing next time. Leo decides to take advantage of this. He is preparing a scandalous report about the abuse of power. The store is visited by robbers again, but this time Teresa is also in danger. However, unexpectedly, the women are saved by another gang planning to profit from the quarantine. By the end of the day, Xander's ward is empty. The nurse says he left with Leo Green, but Alex does not have time to stop them. The duty officer reports that the guy has entered the infection zone. Dr. Connor shows Jake the rats that were injected with the medicine. Unfortunately, right before the cop's eyes, the animal passes out, and the hope for a quick rescue disappears. Jenna manages to call Alex, but the call lasts only a few seconds. The girl does not have time to learn anything. Leo accidentally learns about the call. He again hints to the officer that he has taken the wrong side and should think about what is happening. In gratitude for his help, Leo asks Xander to visit his friends and record a video message with them. The guy completes the task and throws the flash drive over the wall, but on it, the journalist finds evidence that his friends are no longer alive. After this, Xander finally finds his fiancée, but raiders block his way. The general panic is compounded by a new problem: hunger. People's food supplies begin to run out, and the government is forced to find a solution. Walking down the corridor with her son, Caddy meets an old man who supplies the hospital with lab rats. The woman notices another inconsistency. She saw Bert with the rodents before the quarantine, but he assures her that this is not the case. Lammers asks Alex to organize food delivery to the danger zone. The policeman asks for time to prepare, but is refused. He must do it by tomorrow without explanation. Alex has to ask Jake for help. The guy is also not thrilled with the idea, but they have no other choice. Early in the morning, the loading begins, and hundreds of people come to get their rations. The gang from the store also gathers for the distribution, and the leader orders Xander to go with them to stay clean. Jenna goes outside for the first time in many days to get some food. She approaches the distribution center, but a gangster car passes by, making her uneasy. Jake recognizes his friend and gives her a ration without a cue. He also hands her Alex's keys and asks her to hold on, as everything should end soon. Constantly thinking about the epidemic and inconsistencies, Caddy again turns to the doctor with questions, but he is clearly not willing to talk about it. The doctor assures the teacher that he knows no more about the virus than she does. The humanitarian point is surrounded by the store gang. There are many more bandits, and they take the food boxes to sell them to hungry people later. Alex is furious that the leadership did not listen to him, and the products fell into the hands of bandits. But Lammers does not see this as a problem. She believes that residents still have a chance to buy food and satisfy their hunger. Jake's partner turns out to be infected, and the officer offers him help, but the officer refuses to go to the hospital. He knows that no one can help him, and decides to solve the problem on his own. Returning to the shelter, Jenna falls into the hands of other bandits who also try to take the box. The woman is saved by Sam, whom she recently refused to let into the office, but the friends remember Jenna's recent act and, despite everything, do not let her or Sam into the clean zone. Alex and Jake meet again, and the senior partner admits that he no longer trusts the leadership. He tells his friend that, due to the robbery, he had to leave his subordinate in the danger zone. At this moment, this very subordinate calls Chief Esser and reports that their plan worked. Jake tells Caddy that she was right, something is being hidden from them. Dr. Sanders and her boyfriend had no personal belongings, but the conversation has to be postponed. Thomas's sister is admitted to the hospital, asking the teacher to find the boy. Their father died, and Thomas is left alone. Alex also begins to doubt the leadership's honesty, and he goes to Leo's house to hear his version. He finds a journalist drunk, but the guy comes to his senses and promises to help in the search for answers. Despite Jacob's persuasion, Caddy goes in search of Thomas. The gang is joined by the very cop sent by the police chief. He promises the bandits a radio phone in exchange for being accepted into the group. Thomas is not at home, but Caddy discovers her son, who secretly followed her. Quentin tells his mother that he knows where to look for his friend, and the company heads to the baseball field. The search for the truth has to be postponed. Alex is tasked with removing a man from an empty house who is preventing it from being demolished. The cop has to spend a lot of time talking about the happy past the city has lost. Teresa's mother helps the lovers escape. She gives the couple a bag of baby things and tells them to wait for her in a safe place. The company finds Thomas's things, but they are surrounded by a crowd of crazy racers. Jake has to open fire, and only then do the young people continue to search for the boy. Caddy finds her son and his friend, but they are near an infected man. The teacher is frightened, but Thomas assures her that he cannot get infected. Xander and Teresa come to Jenna's office and ask for shelter. One of the girl's friends is against the couple entering, but Jenna lets the guests in without his approval. Thomas is placed in isolation, but Caddy has hope that the boy indeed has immunity and can save everyone. During the meeting, Alex hands Jake a flash drive with a damaged file. If it can be restored, they will learn the truth, but only Jenna can do it. In return, the officer also receives a memory card with a message for the old man from the empty house. When he delivers the message, the stubborn man cannot hold back his tears. Teresa sorts through the baby things and finds the radio phone her mother stole. At that moment, the phone's owners appear at the door, holding a gun to the girl's mother's head. The company has to open the door, but the bandit refuses to take the phone and leave. He demands that Teresa and her boyfriend go with him. Unexpectedly, Jake comes to the rescue. He convinces the gangster to leave and leave the office alone. Alex sees hundreds of people moving in an unknown direction, but no one can say where they will be placed. Jenna tries to open the file, but it is severely damaged. The girl does not have time to do anything with it. New guests appear in the office, a gang wanting access to prohibited drugs. The company begins to strengthen their shelter, but the intruders find weak spots through which they manage to penetrate inside. Tony decides to take a risk. He goes down to negotiate with the criminals, but the negotiations fail. The elevator returns Tony with an axe in his back. In addition to the deceased guy, one of the attackers enters the office, but he does not have time to harm anyone. The guy is infected and collapses at the entrance to the room. Jenna finally manages to restore the file, but the girl does not have time to watch it. The power goes out in the office, and all the doors are locked. To restore power, Jenna has to leave the shelter and go downstairs. Meanwhile, the bandits almost manage to open the elevator doors, but the girl raises the switch in time. On the way back, Jenna takes the radio phone and calls Alex. Talking to his fiancée, the officer hears her being attacked. The girl manages to break free and return to the office, but the intruders do not retreat and try to cut through the door. The company has no choice but to come up with the craziest plan. Alex tries to penetrate the closed zone to help his fiancée, but he is caught by the National Guard soldiers. Jenna orders everyone to take cover, and when the psychos burst into the office, Jake activates an explosive device. A fire starts, but all the attackers are unconscious. Unexpectedly, one of them jumps up and attacks Teresa's mother. The men manage to neutralize him, but the woman is infected. Alex is arrested, but unaware of this, Jenna asks Jake to call her fiancé and calm him down. She also mentions that the phone the bandits had has a government military number and they need to figure out how it ended up in the infection zone. Teresa's mother leaves. As a farewell, she asks her daughter for forgiveness for not wanting to accept her child. More than 48 hours have passed since Thomas's contact with the infected, and the boy continues to look healthy. His DNA is implanted in rats to try to create a vaccine. Connor reports his observations to the leadership, but the boss tells the guy that they don't have time for experiments. Caddy and Jake review footage from surveillance cameras and find out that the Zero patient was not the immigrant boy, but a certain Henry Burns. He came every morning to secretly meet with Dr. Sanders, and judging by the man's behavior, he knew about his illness. Dr. Connor allows Thomas to leave and informs everyone that the boy does not just have immunity, his body defeated the virus. This means that based on his DNA, they will be able to make a cure for the unknown virus. Jenna leads her friends to a church under which there are ancient tunnels. The girl plans to lead the group out of the cordon through them to safety. Alex tells Leo everything he learned from Jake, but the journalist cannot find any trace of Henry Burns. The men get the impression that the Zero patient was deliberately sent to the hospital. Lammers returns Alex's badge and authority, but in return she demands that the cop take Thomas out of the infected zone and hand him over for experiments in her unit. Dr. Connor disagrees with Lammers' decision, but she rejects all objections and insists that only her laboratory can find the cure. Everyone has hope for a quick return to peace and normal life. It seems not everyone will live to see this happy moment, but some decide not to waste time and enjoy the moment, using all possible safety measures. Leo finds out that 2 days before the epidemic started, Burns received a package with the virus. Now he wants to know who the sender was, but Alex asks him to postpone the investigation so he can carry out the order. All night the company breaks through the exit to the tunnel, and in the morning they finally go underground. At the same time, Caddy and Jake go to the meeting place to hand Thomas over to Alex. Dr. Connor realizes he was wrong. The patient bitten by a rat injected with Thomas's DNA is infected. During the seizure, he infects several more people, and the doctor understands that the boy is an asymptomatic carrier. If he leaves the cordon, the virus will take over the entire city. The company has to return due to gas that has accumulated underground. They remain in the infection zone. Meanwhile, Thomas ends up in the hold the zone between districts. He is met by Alex and Dr. Lammers, but at the last moment, the transfer is cancelled and the boy is sent back. While Alex tries to figure out what to do next, he receives a voice message from Leo. The journalist claims that the virus was created by Connor. Alex and Lammers remain in quarantine in the container between the zones. Thomas is returned to the clinic and quarantined to figure out what to do next. Jenna's company returns. The group could not go underground due to accumulated gas, but the office is empty. Teresa and Xander left to find a cleaner place. On the main street, the guy begins to suspect he was wrong. Hundreds of protesters are holding a rally demanding to be released from the infected zone. Xander tries to protect the girl from the crowd, but Teresa sees her mother in the crowd and tries to break through to her. Not wanting to risk his pregnant girlfriend, the guy decides to check who she saw in the crowd. Jake arranges a date for Caddy, and the couple has a great time until a frightened Quentin runs into the room. The boy says that old man Ray took the other children and led them out of the hospital to break through with the others. Leo meets with an ex-girlfriend and asks her to get Connor's call details. He has no doubt that the doctor's to blame, but to prove it, he needs facts. Xander realizes that Teresa was mistaken, but as a result, he encounters an infected person. The boy manages to escape. Unlike Bert, the old man has his box of medicine taken from him and falls to the ground. The street riots intensify, and a squad is sent to the danger zone. Lammers tries to stop the captain, but he does not listen to the doctor's orders, and several vehicles head through the cordon. Jake finds Ray, but the girl he took with him is not there. The old man abandoned her because of virus symptoms. Caddy spots Mary before Jake can tell her about the infection, and the woman takes the child into her arms despite the blood. The crazed crowd pushes Teresa to the ground. Xander runs to her but is afraid to touch his girlfriend for fear of infecting her. When Jake finds his friend, it becomes clear that she is now also sick. Caddy realizes this from her boyfriend's look and upon returning to the hospital, tries to wash off all traces of the infection. Leo gets the information he needs, but it does not match his assumptions. Moreover, his friend tells the journalist that Burns called someone on an encrypted phone that only high-ranking officials can have that day. Susie, Jenna's friend, confesses that she is expecting a baby. Going for a test to check this, Jenna meets Xander and Teresa, who stayed on the street after the riot. Caddy ends up in isolation, and Jake tries to support her, but the girl's nerves can no longer withstand it. After 48 hours, Dr. Lammers and Alex are released from the container. There are only 8 hours left until the end of Caddy's quarantine. At the same time, Teresa's baby is about to be born. Alex visits Leo and finds out that on the day of the infection, Burns did not call Connor, but Lammers. There is no doubt that she started the epidemic for some personal purpose. Dr. Connor conducts his first round after leaving isolation. When he reaches Caddy, he admits that he cannot release her. The onset of symptoms has increased, and 48 hours is no longer a guarantee of health. The soldiers who participated in stopping the riot were infected. Lammers reports this to the journalists, but she promises to find a cure and save the country. At Alex's request, Jake inspects the apartment of Leo's friends, who were also investigating. There he finds ashes, all that remains of the documents and evidence. When friends meet to discuss this, Alex realizes that Lammers and the police chief are involved. Dennis, the father of Susan's child, returns to the office, but the man shows signs of infection on his face, and the company refuses to let him in. To make it easier for the man, Susan tells him that there was a mistake. She is not pregnant, and he has nothing to blame himself for. Alex meets with the chief and says he knows the truth, but it turns out that Besser did not know that Lammers released the virus into the masses. Jenna and Susan fail to ease Teresa's pain, but as usual, Jake appears at the right time. The guy calms the young mother and helps her daughter be born. Alex asks Leo not to publish material against Lammers until they have substantial evidence. An argument begins between the men, and the journalist agrees to wait no more than 2 hours. Not wanting to waste time, Alex goes directly to the doctor and asks her to resign. Lammers tries to intimidate the officer, but when she realizes he is not joking, the woman promises to hold a conference and leave her post. Teresa shows Xander their daughter, and the baby is placed in a crib made of boxes. Jake tells Caddy about this joyful event, but the girl's delight is overshadowed by a cough with traces of blood. Lammers gives a press conference, but does not admit her guilt. She claims that Dr. Connor accidentally released the virus. Still unaware of this, Connor conducts experiments and tries to find a cure. Jake asks him to try to save Caddy, and the doctor agrees to give her a trial dose of serum from Thomas's blood. Old man Bert regains consciousness and discovers that his leg is broken. Despite this, he finds the box of medicine and tries to get home, where his wife has been waiting for him all this time. Connor learns what Lammers did. He does not understand why his colleague did this to him, but despite this, the doctor does not give up trying to save Caddy. Giving her the injection, Connor tells the girl how the virus penetrated their clinic. Jenna meets Bert and gives him her water. She also gives the old man a cart so he can finally reach his wife. After the injection, Caddy gets worse. She is tormented by nightmares and barely waits until morning. To support his friend, Jake brings a TV and invites her to the movies. The couple spends the whole day together, but Caddy gets worse again, and she decides to confess her love to her boyfriend, fearing that there may not be another chance. Jenna tells her friend about her conversation with the gangsters. Trader Miz offered her a route to the healthy zone, but it is very expensive. Sam agrees to contribute his share, but only if Jenna agrees to leave the others and go with him. Alex goes to Leo's apartment, which turns out to be empty. After losing, the journalist refused to fight Lammers, but later the cop receives a pizza from a friend in which Leo left him a note with an address and a key. Caddy gets worse by the minute, and Jake prepares to say goodbye to his friend. He asks the doctor to help him put on a protective suit, and when the girl falls to the floor, the boyfriend takes her hand to ease her suffering. The doctor tells Jake that he can say goodbye to Caddy's body, which is waiting for cremation. For the first time since their acquaintance, the guy manages to touch his friend's face without gloves. Jenna tells her friends about the opportunity to leave and suggests finding the money. But Teresa refuses to go. She wants her daughter to grow up a little. Arriving at the address Leo sent him, Alex finds evidence that will help him punish Lammers. Teresa, Xander, and their newborn daughter reach Bert's house, Teresa's grandfather. The young mother plans to stay at her relative's house until the end of quarantine, but seeing the empty shelves, Xander insists that they must run. Alex learns about a certain Catherine Hops, whose son was connected with Lammers. From her, the man learns the address of the laboratory and heads there. While Dr. Connor tries to create a cure, news about him spreads throughout the zone. A gang breaks into the clinic wanting to punish the doctor, but Jake convinces them that he needs to be protected to be the first to get the vaccine. This is the last thing Jake can do before leaving. He decides to run through the cordon to save Quentin. Alex inspects the abandoned lab and finds solid evidence of Lammer's guilt. He accuses her and names a true Zero patient who fell ill several years ago. This time, Lammers does not argue. She admits she created the virus and believes it is needed for the country's safety. But now she asks Alex to postpone the battle and focus on fighting the virus, which has now crossed the cordon. An attack occurs in the hospital, and one of the gangsters becomes infected. Dr. Connor has to give him the test drug. It is his only chance not to become a victim of the bandits. Jake prepares Quentin to cross into the healthy zone and promises to find him as soon as it is all over. Jenna's company also prepares to go underground to cross the cordon. At the same time, the body of the boy who tried to take the risk is examined and an army is assembled so that no one else can cross the border. To prevent illegal crossings, the tunnels are mined and blown up. Alex tries to stop it, understanding that there may be people there, but the captain refuses to make concessions. Unaware of the government's plans, Ms. orders the fugitives to prepare to descend into the tunnel. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Connor transfuses Thomas's blood to the infected gangster, hoping this will cure him. Despite all attempts, the gangster cannot be saved. Because of this, Jake has to save the doctor. The gang leader cannot forgive him for the loss of his brother. The explosions catch the group deep in the tunnel. The ceiling begins to collapse, and the company is divided. Teresa, Xander, and their baby are left alone. Connor finds a way to make the medicine, but for this he needs people with the same blood as Thomas. Jake tries to find volunteers, but no one wants to participate in the dangerous experiment. Then the guy prepares a speech in which he names all the dead. For their sake, Jake asks people to get tested and, in case of a match, become donors. Ms. leads the group to a dead end, but the guide does not give up and looks for new exits. Alex learns about this and asks Lammers to stop the explosions and bring people to the surface. As an exception, Lammers promises the officer 1 hour. After that, all tunnels will be destroyed. Jake's words convince people and they gather to get tested. Xander takes his family to Teresa's mother's store and the girl decides to stay there until the end. The doctor finds blood with antibodies. A local priest can be a donor for the medicine. Old man Bert spills the last bottle of wine and adds a secret ingredient to it. He and his wife raise their glasses to toast that their suffering ends. Hugging on the couch, the couple prepares to go to a better world. Alex finds the fugitives, among whom he sees Jenna. The girl assures her fiancé will let them into the clean zone, but Alex does not know what to do. His time is running out. Dr. Lammers orders the tunnels destroyed, but at this moment, Leo's report about everything the blonde did appears on the screens. Alex does not let the fugitives go, but returns to the quarantine zone with them. And Jake, scattering Caddy's ashes over the city, prepares for a new battle with the virus that changed the world. After a young priest arrives on an isolated island, supernatural events, incredible miracles, and frightening omens begin to occur. And it turns out that all of this is caused by the blood of an angel, which turns people who drink it into demons. Riley Flynn looks in horror at the girl hit by his car. The man realizes he is guilty because he was drunk, but there is nothing he can do about it. Later, the man freely admits his guilt and goes to prison, where every night before going to sleep he sees the girl he killed. 4 years have passed. Riley's mother, Annie, eagerly awaits his son's arrival in his homeland, a fishing village on Crockett Island off the coast of Washington state, and raises her youngest son, Warren, forbidding him to go to the peat bogs. But the boy wouldn't listen to her lecturing, and having met his friends, he goes to the forbidden place because no one will prevent the young people there from trying illegal substances and having a great time. They buy the stuff from a local dealer and go to the peat bogs. On the way, the guys stop at the house where Lisa lives. The girl cannot walk. She refuses the offered treat, and the trio goes on their way. At this time, a young man with a huge box locked with padlocks enters the door of the local priest's house. The boys get into a boat and make their way to the far shore of the island. It's already dark, so when they hear a sound of huge wings, the boys mistake them for a giant heron taking off. The peat bogs are also teeming with stray cats that were brought here from the mainland, and they feed on old remains because up until the 1920s people buried their dead right in the yards. And now when the peat bogs get flooded, those remains resurface. Warren knows this because after storms, all this creepiness washes ashore where their house stands. The boys settle in their usual spot and after taking some revelatory substances start telling tales about local ghosts. At that moment loud cat cries are heard from the bushes and Warren, shining his flashlight in that direction, sees two burning eyes following them, but they immediately disappear and the boy forgets about the incident. In the morning, Riley arrives on the island. Annie meets her son and apologizes for his father and younger brother who could not meet him because they were out fishing. Meanwhile, the ferry is met by a zealous parishioner, Bev Keane, who is concerned about the long absence of Father Pruitt, but the priest is not on the ferry. Meanwhile, teacher Erin Grin undergoes an ultrasound examination of the unborn child and the doctor assures her that there is nothing wrong with the baby. The women pay attention to Riley, from which they are distracted by the appearance of the doctor's elderly mother who suffers from dementia. Annie introduces her son to the new sheriff and the latter greets the boy. The sheriff then wakes up the only detainee, local alcoholic Joe, who came running in the night screaming that a huge albatross was chasing him. The sheriff releases sobered up Joe and he walks out to his dog who has been waiting for his master at the exit all night. Bev, who is passing by, is indignant. The dog is dangerous, it could attack, but they don't listen to her. Meanwhile, Riley and Annie reach their house. The woman shares her problems. There has been an oil spill accident and now fishermen can only catch fish according to their quota. Naturally, this causes money problems. Previously, hundreds of families lived on the island, but now there are only dozens left. In the meantime, there is a meeting at the school because a storm is coming to the island very soon and it is necessary to make sure the shelter is ready. The new sheriff calls for it to be equipped in the school, but Bev objects. Everything has been ready in the church for a long time and there is no need to change anything. All members of the Flynn family finally get together for dinner. Riley informs them that he has to travel to the mainland to check in with the Alcoholics Anonymous, which is one of the conditions for his release. Warren talks about the new teacher, a daughter of an ex. Riley perks up. Is Erin really back on the island? And learns of her pregnancy. Annie announces that their old priest, Father Pruitt, has made the trip to the Holy Land, despite his age-related problems. Warren serves as an altar boy and is aware of the pastor's forgetfulness. Riley disappoints his parents. He has no intention of going to church, which incurs the wrath of his father, a devout Catholic. Meanwhile, Bev notices a light in the windows of Pruitt's house and upon entering stares in surprise at the man who meets her. And in the shoreline thickets, attacks on the cats begin to occur. Before going to bed, the father tells Riley that after what happened to him, Annie goes to church every day and prays for him. He asks the boy to at least sit in the pew for it is very important to his mother. At this time, the new sheriff and his son perform namaz before going to bed. The doctor catches the mother trying to climb to the second floor, and Riley sees Warren climb out the window to go to his friends. At night, Riley as usual sees recurrent dreams of the dead girl and of himself sitting in the boat. The dawn is breaking. The altar workers are preparing for the upcoming church service and notice that the wine bowls are already full. The congregation takes their seats. Bev opens the service, people sing hymns while the new priest enters the room. Paul Hill has been sent to replace Father Pruitt, who has left and is hospitalized on the mainland. Paul conducts the service and administers communion to the faithful except for Riley, who has refused to do so. The new priest calls all the parishioners by name, explaining this by Pruitt's stories. Riley decides to accompany Erin, and the young people reminisce about their past encounters and talk about their experiences. They both vowed not to go back, but nevertheless they are on the island again. Riley lost everything after the accident and Erin is separated from her husband. The man admits that he read all about different religions while he was in prison because he hoped to find God but ended up being an atheist. And here he is of no use to anyone and doesn't know how to move on. In the evening, the storm comes to the island and Riley sees what looks like Father Pruitt walking along the beach, but when he goes out to look, he finds no one. And in the morning, people find hundreds of dead cats on the beach. The citizens cannot determine the cause of death of these animals, although the sheriff suggests some kind of disease, until he discovers that there is not a drop of blood in their bodies. Riley admits to seeing Monsignor Pruitt at night, but nobody believes him. Later, the man travels to the mainland while Father Paul holds a service, but the church is almost empty. Of the regular parishioners, there's only Lisa, the mayor's paralyzed daughter. The priest gives her communion, then walks her home and learns that the girl's mutilation is the result of an accidental shooting by drunk Joe. In the meantime, Erin catches Bev in the storeroom, from where the woman takes a box of poison intending to poison the rats, which have become too numerous. And Father Paul comes to Dr. Sarah's house to administer communion to her sick mother. The elderly woman calls him by the name of Pruitt, which her daughter believes is a symptom of the developing dementia. Back on the island, Riley speaks to Erin. It becomes clear that the two were romantically involved in their early youth. And Annie suddenly notices that her eyesight has improved considerably. In the morning, Father Paul meets his flock at Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Easter Lent. He gives an inspiring speech about the rebirth of the island and the first disciples of Christ, the fishermen, and he reminds them, man must remember that he is dust, and to dust he shall return. After the blessing, the residents gather for the feast. Riley speaks to the priest and again recalls Father Pruitt. He is convinced his eyes did not betray him that night. It was Father Pruitt. Father Paul suggests starting an Alcoholics Anonymous group on the island so that Riley doesn't have to travel so far, especially since there are others here suffering from this evil. The fun is interrupted by an unpleasant incident. Joe's dog dies after eating food off the ground. A new morning arrives. Riley goes out fishing with his father because the father has a bad back. Meanwhile, the sheriff goes to the school pantry where Bev confesses that she left poison in some parts of the island and the dog really could have died from it. But it was unintentional and anyone could have taken the poison. In the evening, Riley visits Father Paul and reveals that Bev has extorted donations for the church from the parishioners after convincing them to accept an agreement with the oil company that poisoned the waters of the bay and to receive generous compensation. And it's the same story everywhere else in the world. Villages are getting poorer and churches are getting more luxurious. The father reminds Riley that he was once a believer, and the boy expresses his contempt for the doctrine of good deity because the idea that suffering leads to purification is appalling. At night, Erin sees a mysterious creature near her house and noticing the bloody discharge rushes to the doctor. But Sarah reassures the woman there is nothing wrong with her baby. Later, she has to convince the frightened mother that she just imagined a face in the window. Meanwhile, the dealer passing by an empty house hears strange noises inside. He walks through the door and is attacked. It is morning and Father Paul, for some reason, takes a particularly close look at Lisa. Then he insists that the girl get up from her chair and come up for communion. And to everyone's shock, Lisa gets up and walks up to the priest. At night, Father Paul enters the confessional and tells himself that he is lying to the parishioners. After all, Father Pruitt was sicker than they thought, and having gone to the Holy Land, the man often fell behind the group. But the parishioners don't need to know that. They will believe that their shepherd is being healed on the mainland and will soon return to the island to witness the miracles that are happening. For after Lisa's recovery, which is perceived by the residents as a miracle, a religious revival begins on Crockett Island. Except that Father Paul himself becomes sick and vomits blood after the accomplishment, which Bev sees, and then the woman notices a newspaper clipping with Father Pruitt's portrait hanging on the wall of the priest's house. The doctor examines Lisa and cannot understand the miracle that has occurred, but her parents strongly oppose her examination on the mainland. And later, the woman finds her mother on the second floor of the house, to which she climbed on her own, although she has not been able to walk for a long time. Meanwhile, suffering people begin to converge on the church, which pleases Bev immensely but displeases Father Paul. He doesn't need the publicity, especially since many, including Riley, think it's a misdiagnosis by doctors. But that same evening, a miracle happens to his father. The man suddenly stops having back pain and even asks his wife to dance. At this time, Lisa summons Warren and the couple runs off to have fun, and Riley goes to Erin. More and more parishioners come to the morning mass. And one day, Warren catches Father Paul pouring some kind of liquid into the wine, and during the sermon, the priest suddenly collapses without feeling. The story shifts to the time of Father Paul's confession, in which he tells the true story of Monsignor Pruitt. After a visit to Jerusalem near Damascus, he was caught in a sandstorm and took refuge in ancient ruins. This is where Father Paul comes to his senses. He is examined by Sarah, though the man is against any intervention. Meanwhile, the sheriff finds a Bible in his son Ali's possession, and Lisa visits Joe and confesses that she hated him for years for stealing her future but eventually forgives him. That same day at the school assembly, the sheriff tries unsuccessfully to convince Bev to stop handing out the Bibles to public school students. Later, Erin confesses that she's intimidated by Bev's confidence in her rightness, and Riley shares with her Father Paul's assignment to write penitential letters to loved ones. That same evening, Sarah's mother begins to speak quite sensibly, much to the doctor's surprise. And touched by Lisa's forgiveness, Joe decides to attend the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting with Riley and Father Paul because he intends to change his life. The men go home and Joe confesses that he recently buried his sister on the mainland. That same evening, Ali asks for his father's permission to attend the mass. The kid is interested in everything that happens in the church, but the sheriff is against it. They are Muslims. Ali reminds him it's his father's decision, not his. But the father recalls how his dying wife praised Allah until the very last moment. God cannot decide who gets a miracle and who does not. The sheriff turns off the light and jumps away from the window because behind it is a pale face, but the next moment there is nothing. In the meantime, Father Paul collapses in front of Bev and the congregation and dies coughing up blood. The action carries over to the moment when Pruitt takes refuge in the dark cave. He burns matches, trying to make out the room where he is trapped, and suddenly sees two burning eyes. Then he is attacked by a nightmarish creature that sucks his blood and drinks his own blood in return. The priest concludes that it is an angel because when he wakes up in the morning, Pruitt finds that he is young again. So he decided to take his savior with him. He rode ahead, waiting for the angel to catch up with him. And he was very much afraid that the angel would disappear. Here on the island he hid it from everyone and lied to the parishioners because he was Father Pruitt. The next moment the priest comes back to life. During a scheduled checkup, the doctor informs Erin that her uterus is empty. It was probably a miscarriage. The woman is shocked. How could she not have noticed it at such a late stage? Meanwhile, Bev cancels the mass and her assistant notices the incredible resemblance between Father Paul and Monsignor Pruitt. She is convinced of the miracle and the others are simply frightened. Bev enters the priest's room and discovers that he cannot stand the light. It is also as if he can feel God inside him. Bev persuades him to manifest the miracle to his new apostles. Riley notices an improvement in his father's well-being, and the father confesses his unjust anger towards his son and asks for forgiveness for his omissions. Meanwhile, Sarah is collecting Erin's tests when her mother enters the office. She answers her daughter's questions confidently and looks much better than before. And then Sarah sees the blood in the test tube begin to boil in the sun and burn to the ground. In the meantime, distraught, Erin spends the day with Riley, mourning her unborn child and discussing their childhood. She resents her mother, who was a real dictator and never loved her daughter. And then she managed to marry her mother's mental double, which only her pregnancy saved her from. She just packed up and left. Then Riley recounts his dream. At this time, Father Paul is reciting prayers, which makes him sick, and then he notices the mark of the cross on his hand. He cuts his hand and drinks his blood. Joe tries to talk himself out of buying alcohol, and he succeeds with great difficulty. At night, Father Paul holds an evening communion at the house of the doctor's elderly mother, Mildred, who recognizes him as Monsignor Pruitt. Meanwhile, Riley and Erin talk about their ideas of the afterlife and the basics of religion, after which they feel better. That same evening, Joe stops by Father Paul's house and witnesses Father Paul drinking communion wine. Joe looks at the portrait of Pruitt on the wall. Father Paul looks very much like him. The priest embraces Joe, who pulls away, falls, and smashes his head. Seeing the blood, the priest loses his mind and takes to drinking it. In the morning, Riley explains that his dream has changed. Erin has appeared in it, and the woman is sent to the mainland to another doctor. Meanwhile, Bev discovers Joe's dead body and exhausted Father Paul. She asks the mayor's wife to sing hymns, and she herself orders a couple of parishioners to dispose of the corpse. Bev believes that the priest's actions are justified and that his resurrection is a foreshadowing of Christ's second coming. At this time, Erin hears an expert opinion of the doctor, who doubts that the pregnancy was real. By evening, Father Paul feels good again. He holds an Alcoholic Anonymous meeting, explaining Joe's absence by his trip to see his sister. But Riley knows that this is not true and leaves the meeting confused. When he arrives home, he tells his mother about the priest's lies. At night, Father Paul is visited by Angel, who begins to fill the goblet with his blood, while Riley, determined to deal with it, returns to the recreation center. He opens the doors and is attacked by Angel. In the morning, Sarah's mother impresses her daughter with her blooming appearance, and the sheriff is approached by the mother of the missing dealer who asks him to track down her son. Meanwhile, the parishioners are informed that the Mass has been postponed until midnight due to Father Paul's illness, and the startled people view Mildred, who is considerably younger. Erin, concerned about Riley's sudden disappearance, files a missing persons report with the sheriff, but the letter suggests that Riley may have gone on a bench or committed suicide. At Good Friday Mass, Father Paul delivers a sermon replete with militaristic rhetoric, urging the congregation to prepare for war as soldiers in the Lord's army. This sermon upsets Mildred, who forbids her daughter to attend the church any further. At night, Erin is visited by Riley, who asks her to go in a boat with him. The woman agrees, even though she suspects something is amiss. After sailing far from the island, Riley recounts what has happened to him. After Angel's attack, he quickly recovered under Father Paul's care. When Riley tried to go outside, he was burnt and was forced to return and listen to the revelations of Father Paul. The priest is convinced that the angel's blood is a gift from God, and he mixes it into his communion wine to cure the people of Crockett Island of all illnesses. The priest also admitted that he had killed Joe, but according to him, the murder was justified. He also believes that the vampirism traits they both display are the grace of God, which Bev fully agrees with. Father Paul demonstrated to the boy his desire for blood as food, but reassured him that this would soon pass. Nevertheless, Riley is not ready to acknowledge what has happened as divine providence, while the priest reminds him of the fear of all who have seen miracles. Meanwhile, Bev brings Riley the goblet of the congregation's blood and he drinks it. The priest releases Riley without listening to Bev's objections, for the man's rebirth is complete. Outside, Riley notices how his perception has changed. The colors are brighter and the air more saturated, and he witnesses a conversation between Mildred and his daughter. He visits his sleeping family before heading over to Erin's. Then they head out to sea, where he has nowhere to go. Riley confesses his love for Erin and asks the woman to flee the island. She reciprocates, but at this moment the dawn breaks. Riley sees in the boat the girl he killed in the accident. She smiles and takes his hand. Riley ignites and burns, turning to ash, and Erin screams in terror. The relatives find Riley's letters while Erin returns to the island and tells Sarah about what is happening in the city. The doctor shows how her blood samples are vaporized by the sunlight and shows rejuvenated Mildred. At this time, Paul confesses to Bev that he senses Riley's death, but the woman reassures him that the boy, having received a great gift, has chosen his own path. She reminds him of Judah, who is also part of God's plan. Sarah shares with Erin and Mildred her theory that Father Paul is spreading a miracle-creating virus through communion wine. This would also explain the missing pregnancy. After all, it is a foreign element in the body which the virus has decided to deal with dramatically. At this time, Ben brings his son's letters to Father Paul. He senses that something bad has happened. One of the letters is addressed to his father, and Ben asks him to give it to the Monsignor. After Ben leaves, Paul opens the letter and receives a quote, a reminder that they are all ashes, and to dust they shall return. And Erin tries to tell Annie about Riley's death, but the angry woman throws her out, not wanting to believe the terrible news. Sarah informs the sheriff of her suspicions about what is happening in the church, but he refuses to take any action, not wanting to further aggravate relations with the locals, especially since he has already encountered unfair and prejudicial treatment. Erin, Sarah, and Mildred decide to move to the mainland, but find that the mayor has sent the ferries away for repairs, and the fishing boats are almost all in need of repairs. During the night, the power and mobile network go out, which are also shut down by Bev's handmaidens. Erin decides to go to the Mass to see the danger for herself. Meanwhile, the sheriff allows his son to attend the midnight Mass, and he asks his father to go with him. Before the Mass begins, the townspeople make a procession around the island with candles and hymn singing. The service begins with Father Paul confessing to our lie. Then he confesses that he's Monsignor Pruitt. And today is the beginning of a new era for all of them because holy blood flows in their veins. He calls a parishioner and asks him to drink poison, to die and be reborn. The man drinks it and drops dead. When some people see this, they rush to the exit, but the angel in shining garb stands in the doorway. The creature reaches the dais and spreads his wings to the astonished gaps of the people, and then the dead man comes to life and gets to his feet. Bev and her assistants bring out cups of poison and hand them out to everyone present. The sheriff tries to take Ali away, but the boy pulls out his hand. He wants to stay with God. That is when the policeman pulls out his gun, but the congregation rushes at him and throws him to the floor. The boy, in spite of his father's screams, drinks the poison. Lisa's parents do the same, but the girl refuses. Unimaginable things are happening all around. Some are drinking the poison, the others are pushing the cups away. Then Mildred raises the sheriff's gun and shoots Father Paul in the head. A vampire attacks her and carries her away in his claws from the church. Bev orders the doors to be locked. Meanwhile, Ali comes back to life. The dead parishioners are resurrected as vampires and, hungry, attack those who have not drunk the poison. All hell breaks loose with screams and blood everywhere. Ed turns into a vampire and Sheriff Aaron, Lisa, Sarah, Warren and Annie flee. But Bev gets in their way. Aaron shoots her, after which the group escapes. Father Paul regains consciousness while resurrected Bev and her assistant send vampires to attack the townspeople who are not present at the church. After the parishioners turned vampires have left the church, Father Paul is resurrected and, disappointed by the outcome of the mass, removes his robes and remains sitting alone on the steps of the altar of the bloody church, looking at Mildred, who has also turned. Screams can be heard in the town. The vampires are killing their loved ones and converting them. Meanwhile, the group of the runaways hide out in Aaron's house, pondering over a future plan of action. Warren recalls his canoe, which is hidden on the outskirts of the island, and Aaron realizes that the vampires needed the boats for something. She becomes terrified at the thought that some of the monsters might make it to the mainland. Suddenly, a burning bottle flies in through the window, setting the house on fire. It is Bev. She wants to settle the score with Aaron, who shot her. To allow the group to escape, Annie distracts the attackers by exposing Bev's motives. She is just jealous that God loves everyone without singling her out. Bev, who is always so right and so good, must be furious. Then Annie commits suicide by seducing the vampires with her blood. Meanwhile, John Pruitt recalls his affair with Mildred, which resulted in the birth of Sarah, who was forced to live with her fake father, as such circumstances were unacceptable for the pastor. The priest admits that the main reason for bringing Angel to the island was his desire to cure Mildred and live in peace with her and his daughter as a full family. The survivors decide to split up. The adults go to burn the boats prepared by the vampires to leave for the mainland to spread vampirism, while Lisa and Warren flee toward the peat bogs, where the younger Flynn's canoe is stored. Along the way, they encounter other vampires more than once, attacking innocent people who have not attended the midnight mass. Drunk on blood, Bev proposes not to extinguish the house, but instead to burn every building on the island, following the biblical story of the end of the world and the Ark, which will be the building of the rehabilitation center. She and her assistant go to burn the city, unaware that some converts who have not lost their reason and morals refuse to kill. Among them are Riley's parents, who find each other in the middle of the night. The sheriff, Aaron and Sarah, meanwhile, set fire to the boats, and Lisa and Warren hide in an abandoned house, unaware that they have entered the lair of the beast. The girl lights a match and sees the angel drinking blood of the man dragged into the house. Lisa shoots the monster, but he's so engrossed in what he's doing that he doesn't even notice them. Then Lisa douses the room with fuel, and walking out the door they set fire to the house, but the angel breaks free and flies off into the night. At this time, Bev has already prepared a center for the converts to wait out the dawn and calls them out with the sound of a bell. She quotes statements about the Ark, but Pruitt abandons her idea and is unwilling to be the leader of the converts. Bev reports that the boats are burned, while Lisa and Warren mentally say goodbye to their families and get into their canoe. Bev takes command and throws the atheist convert out of the Ark, mocking his desire to save himself with the believers. Monsignor, on the other hand, invites the man to stay in the church, for God loves everyone regardless of their views, because everyone is worthy of salvation. But once inside the church, John sees Sarah, who is going to burn everything with kerosene and a lighter. He confesses that he's her father and regrets that he didn't get to know her better. But at that moment, one of Bev's underlings shoots Sarah. Enraged, Pruitt attacks him, wanting to kill him, but stops himself in time, remembering who he is and where he is. John tries to save Sarah and lets her drink his blood to turn her into a vampire, but she spits it back out, wanting to die human. John and Mildred mourn their daughter's death. They take her body, burn the church, and leave for the bridge by the river. a memorable place where Sarah often played as a child. Meanwhile, the walls of the rehab center are doused with kerosene by the surviving sheriff. Bev mocks the sheriff's religion and shoots him, and Erin emerges from the building spilling kerosene inside but is picked up by a flying vampire taking her aside and gnawing at her neck. But then Ali picks up the lighter and throws it into the building. Bev takes another shot at the sheriff, but his son rushes to the man and takes him away. Realizing that there are no more places to wait out the dawn, the converts disperse, wanting to spend their last moments with their loved ones. Slowly dying, Erin shreds the wings of the blood-sucking vampire with a knife, after which the vampire struggles to rise into the air. He is spotted by Lisa and Warren, who are watching the shore from the boat, and they note the monster's slow speed and that he's unlikely to make it to the mainland before dawn. Erin dies looking up at the stars and remembering Riley. Bev leaves to meet the dawn on the beach. The wounded sheriff and his son also go to the shore, where together they begin to pray, adhering to their native religion. Monsignor Pruitt and Mildred sit on the bridge holding Sarah's body. The father renounces the church and begs his beloved for forgiveness. Finally, dawn breaks. Ali burns in the sunlight, sitting by his father's dead body. Desperate, Bev tries to dig a shelter in the sand and burns up in hysterics. Riley's parents, in a crowd of similarly converted people, greet the dawn by singing hymns praising the Lord. All the islanders burn while Pruitt and Mildred kiss against the rising sun. The only survivors, Lisa and Warren, watch the fire. Suddenly, the girl confesses that she can no longer feel her legs. And that's the end of the series. Write in the comments what you think of this series. Japan 2023. People board a train and head to work. Everyone is busy with their own things, scrolling through Instagram feeds, making acquaintances on social networks, and discussing plans for the evening, unaware that in just a few minutes, their lives will change forever. Suddenly, the train's speed increases, and strange things start happening. A bottle cap rolling on the floor of the carriage suddenly disappears. Passengers begin receiving alerts about powerful earthquakes on their phones. Then the train enters a gloomy tunnel and comes to a sudden halt. People regain consciousness, bewildered by what has happened. One of the passengers opens the entrance doors, and people, screaming and pushing each other, rush to the exit, jumping from the high steps. But once outside, they can't believe their eyes. Traces of the civilized world are gone, and they are surrounded by the remnants of a destroyed city, overgrown with trees and grass. Moreover, all the carriages have disappeared without a trace, except for the fifth one they were in. As time passes, the passengers begin to get acquainted. One of the guys, Shirahama, a firefighter, examines the injured and suggests checking the tunnel behind the carriage. He is joined by a girl named Katana and a guy named Hayashima, who also wants to understand what happened. Meanwhile, the police in the city cannot figure out where the last two carriages have gone, while the rest of the train, along with the passengers, remains undamaged. The three volunteers enter the tunnel and walk through the dark underworld for a long time. Suddenly, they notice a light ahead and hurry towards it, but when they emerge outside, they are astonished. There is nothing around that would remind them of the year 2023 with skyscrapers and technology, just a vast, lifeless desert. Shocked, the trio returns to their fellow misfortune mates. Initially, people do not believe their report, but after Hayashima shows a video recording of the surroundings, they are forced to accept the new reality. After 7 hours, people languish in anticipation of rescuers, when one of the girls, Reni, secretly looks into Hayashima's bag and finds a letter marked with the criminal department's seals, leading her to suspect that the guy's a criminal. Then Reni snatches food from Katana's bag, but, thinking she was seen, discards the package. Hayashima picks it up and carries it to the train, just as Katana discovers the theft. Seeing it in the guy's hands, the passengers accuse him of theft. Moreover, Reni reports about the letter from the colony. Offended, Hayashima denies the accusations and announces his departure. At this time, Shirahama pulls out a box of fruits and offers to share them. While Katana is distributing the food, one of the guys reviews the video he made earlier, clearly showing Reni stealing the food. Realizing that Hayashima is innocent, Shirahama and Katana run after him, managing to save the guy who nearly falls into a deep ditch. In gratitude, he confesses that he works as a hairdresser and is already 30 years old. But he refuses to explain the origin of the letter from the colony. Night falls. Passengers somehow settle down to sleep, but many cannot sleep, worrying about their future. In the morning, people begin to realize that they may never return home. Shirahama tries to gather the scattering people, but a friend asks the guide not to take responsibility for others' lives. Then the firefighter confesses that because of him, his colleague was injured, losing the ability to walk. Now he believes he must help everyone he can. Together, they catch up with those who left and persuade them to return to the carriage to solve problems collectively. Seeing this, Hayashima remembers his brother who was in prison, and the letter in his bag was from him. Fate had it that he had to take on the upbringing of his younger brother, and he still feels guilty for his older brother becoming a criminal. Meanwhile, a couple of passengers explore the surrounding area and find the ruins of a high tower. This is particularly strange because the news reported its construction, which was supposed to be completed in 2026. And one of the passengers found a can in the forest dated that year. A biologist among them encountered a plant whose genetic modification takes 30 years. It turns out that they are in the distant future of Earth, and it's far from a joyful discovery. At the same time in 2023, all channels are broadcasting messages about the disappearance of 2 carriages, which had at least 100 passengers. Night approaches and many fall into despair, while Katana and Shirahama place plastic containers on the roof of the carriage, hoping for rain. In the morning, the biologist draws the others' attention to the dense greenery, which means there must be a body of water nearby. A group of youth sets out to explore the forest. Along the way, Hayashima confesses that his parents are criminals, and then the guy spots a frog. This means water is very close, but ahead are impassable cliffs, which can only be climbed with the help of ropes. The group returns to the train and cutting wires heads back to the cliffs. Shirahama climbs to the top and joyfully shouts upon seeing a waterfall, but looking around he is horrified. Instead of Mount Fuji, a sea stretches out before him. Returning, he tells the others about this, and people start to speculate what happened to their planet. At night, everyone goes to sleep, but the eldest passenger, Tanaka, goes outside and sees an unfamiliar person. But when he tells about it, no one believes him. Then it starts to rain, helping people to collect water and even bathe. Meanwhile, the biologist continues to study the surrounding fauna, finds several edible plants, and shows them to the others. And still, Katana manages to eat a poisonous berry, but fortunately, her poisoning is not fatal. The news that the girl has recovered has a sobering effect on the passengers. They finally realize that sitting still, they won't survive. People get to work and even make utensils from bamboo. Bank cards turn out to be decent knives. The group of youths brings water from the waterfall, and they prepare a soup from plants. But after dinner, some feel sick and the biologist discovers a couple of poisonous berries in the common pot. Someone remembers seeing Tanaka near the pot, who is not among them. Shirahama sets out to look for him, but stumbles, falls, and loses his torch. After a while, Shirahama returns without Tanaka, but with Hayashima's previously lost barber tools, which he had sorely missed. In the morning, the biologist announces to the people that he is going to look for a river, which should be nearby. His friends go with him. But in the forest, they encounter a stranger who injures the biologist and runs away. The guys carry him back to the train, where fortunately there is a medical student who provides the injured with first aid. The others help as much as they can and pray for the guy. Later, Tanaka unexpectedly returns from the forest. It turns out he worked for a security company and can show how to make traps around the camp. Reni asks Hayashima to fix her hair, and soon there's a queue for the guy. Meanwhile, Shirahama and Katana notice a teenager caught in one of the traps, but the youngster gets out on his own and runs away. The friends hurry after him and soon find themselves by the river, but the boy asks them to wait for him at the spot and disappears into the forest. Hayashima, noticing their disappearance, catches up with the pair. At this time, the teenager returns and leads the friends to carriage number 6, which mysteriously ended up several kilometers away from the 5th carriage. The passengers from the 5th carriage are welcomed by the leader of the group from the 6th carriage, Yumamoto. Their carriage was lucky to be near the river, where there was plenty of fresh water and fish. Moreover, among them was a builder who, under his guidance, they were able to quickly set up a camp and even build a kitchen and a toilet. The newcomers find the one who injured their biologist. He confesses that he did it out of fear, thinking they were going to attack him. He bows deeply, apologizing for his action. And Yumamoto admits that he believes a return to the past is possible. The man told them that in the early days they found a small boat on the river where he managed to fix the radio and catch a signal, apparently from Canada, where the year 2060 was mentioned. From what he heard, the man understood that in 2026 a disaster occurred. A huge asteroid fell to Earth, causing powerful earthquakes and tsunamis worldwide, instantly taking billions of lives. The dust thrown into the atmosphere blocked sunlight, leading to the extinction of the remaining species. But the main thing is that the asteroid didn't fall by chance. It was space debris, as besides state corporations, satellites began to be launched by anyone who fancied. One of the probes collided with a satellite, which in turn fell onto an asteroid, leading to a deviation of its orbit. So it was a man-made disaster. That's why it's so important to return to their year and change the future. Inspired by the example of the sixth carriage, the passengers decided to make a bath by the river. Meanwhile, Tanaka continues to deteriorate, making himself a doll from branches and talking to it. In the morning, the bath is ready. For the first time in many days, people bathe in hot water and wash their clothes. And the guys find a strange stone on the riverbank, which Yamamoto learns about. He sends his people to find it, but Rennie notices strangers, and one of the guys lets slip that according to their leader, this stone might help them return home. The girls argue about the need to return, and Rennie pushes Katana away. She falls and accidentally shifts a layer of soil under which a dead body is discovered. Meanwhile, Tanaka reads in a newspaper an announcement about the search for a murderer in his description. At that time, Rennie and Katana are attacked by guys from the sixth carriage, but Rennie breaks free and runs to her own, where she tells about the found corpse, while Katana escapes from the guys through the forest. The fifth carriage decides to make weapons, while Shirahama and Hayashima run to the neighbors. But the girl is not there, and Katana meanwhile makes it to the boat. Yamamoto is forced to confess to the guys that he killed one of the passengers, who suddenly became aggressive and started attacking people with a knife. That's why he was recognized as a leader. The guys go home, hoping that Katana has returned, but she's not there, and the rest urge to go to the sixth carriage and punish the guilty. And the guys go again to look for the girl. Katana hides in the boat when Yamamoto comes in. He pretends to be calling an unknown station, but the girl sees that the wires are cut. The man discovers her and confesses that he doesn't want to return to the past because he intends to create a new society here. After that, he ties up Katana and locks her in the cabin, where her screams cannot be heard. In the morning, the passengers of the fifth carriage are just about to attack the neighbors when one of the women suggests backing up and looking for a building where they could hide. At this time, guys from the sixth carriage go to the neighbors to scavenge something, but they fall into traps. A fight starts when the rest of the sixth carriage's passengers arrive, and there are more men among them. The fight escalates into a real battle, which is stopped by the appearance of the escaped Katana, who accuses Yamamoto of lying. He is forced to admit to the deception, but he just wanted to keep people's spirits up. However, the passengers decide to exile the former leader. Before leaving, the man hands over a journal from the ship, which contains information about the tower that could help them return to the past. Meanwhile, those who went to search for the building reach the tower and find glowing asteroid fragments there. And in 2023, scientist Ray, after reviewing the video surveillance camera recordings, discovers that a wormhole appeared in the tunnel at the moment of the disappearance of two carriages, which apparently was the result of a distortion in the space-time continuum. The passengers study the journal found by Yamamoto and learn the exact date of the disaster. Moreover, they have an asteroid fragment that possesses a phenomenal magnetic charge. One of the passengers remembers how on the day of their departure, he saw something in the sky resembling a falling star. In the past, Ray, analyzing the same event, concludes that it was the flare from a supernova explosion. In the future, there's also an expert who explains that supernovas occur in space when a star reaches the end of its life cycle and explodes, releasing a massive amount of energy. Apparently, this created the temporal rift into which both carriages fell. It means they need to open this wormhole again. In the evening, a strong storm begins, forcing people to seek more reliable shelter than the carriage. Tanaka opens the rear doors leading into the tunnel. Unexpectedly, a strong gust snatches his doll and sucks it into the wormhole caused by the hurricane. But as soon as the storm subsides, the wormhole disappears. And in 2023, scientists find Tanaka's doll. Passengers in the future conclude that to summon the wormhole, they need a powerful energy source, for which they start looking for remnants of power lines. Digging up each post, the passengers find an electrical substation where somehow working equipment is preserved. They redirect enough electricity into the tunnel to stabilize the wormhole with the onset of the next storm, enough to return to the past. The storm starts at night, supported by the power of the substation. The wormhole opens, and everyone enters the carriage except Tanaka, who refused to return. The carriage is swallowed by the hole and races somewhere in space and time until its doors are opened by security service employees who say they have arrived on May 1, 2026, which means there are only a few months left before the asteroid falls. After going through quarantine procedures, the passengers tell the officials, presenting as evidence fragments of the meteorite and unusual plants from the future. Only the officials don't believe the stories about the upcoming apocalypse. Later, the internet buzzes about the incident. The time travelers find fans, which helps maintain interest in the traveler's story about the upcoming end of the world. Meanwhile, scientist Ray becomes convinced that the travelers are telling the truth, as he has also tracked the asteroid. One of the passengers posts an appeal on the internet telling ordinary people about the impending danger, and a passenger who held a high position in the government before the trip makes her way to the Minister of Defense. She listens to her former colleague and reports that the government believed them and is already preparing to launch a missile capable of altering the asteroid's trajectory to pass by Earth. Time passes, and the day of the catastrophe is about to dawn. The travelers decide to gather together on the platform to find out whether it was possible to avert the disaster, and if not, to perish together. But the military successfully completes their task and changes the meteorite's trajectory, saving humanity from total extinction. Quite an unusual series where various theories about the impending doom of humanity are mixed. And the finale of the story is very relevant, emphasizing that life on Earth is the result of the actions of each living being, and the future of the planet is a collective human responsibility. The film takes place in the small town of Vengenberg, where a young girl named Jennifer lives with a skewed face and a disgusting hump in the family of a cowman. Because of her ugly appearance, the girl is constantly mocked by the locals, and one day when Jennifer is once again mocked by a couple of local young men, the girl accidentally opens a portal to the magical Tor Lara in Aretuza, where she's met by the young wizard Istrid. The guy is concerned. All magic leaves traces, which wizards can use to find someone who has even an ounce of magic in them. He decides to save the budding sorceress and opens a safe portal that brings Jennifer home. Time later, a beautiful and wealthy lady arrives at the farm of the girl's father to buy a pig. But upon seeing the girl, she expresses a desire to buy her too. And the father, who does not hide his disgust for his daughter, sells her for half the price of the animal, despite the pleas of her mother, who recognizes the lady as a witch. So Jennifer finds herself in the magical school of the enchantress Tisaya of Rees, where several girls are already studying. At first, Jennifer takes the separation from home hard and how low her father judged her. She even tried to commit suicide, but when classes begin, she discovers that the young wizard was right. It was her inadvertent wizardry that caused the wave and caught the attention of the school's rector, the wizardess Tisaya. The girls who study at the school have also distinguished themselves with the same unique skills. Soon Tisaya holds the first test. The girls must lift a stone and a flower without touching them and using a spell. Everyone more or less manages to cope with the task, but Jennifer fails. The girl stubbornly tries again and again until Tisaya stops her. Frustrated, Jennifer runs away. Later, she finds Istrid in the cave and tells him her name. Sometime later, Tisaya trains her female pupils to recognize man's greatest fear. She sees the girls in pairs and orders them to look into each other's eyes until they get inside their rival schemes. Jennifer pairs up to encourage the girl, but she again fails. Tisaya is enraged. Jennifer is useless, and this is because she's lying to herself. Even if she were a beauty, no one would love her. Although she's not the only one to whom she has problems, Jennifer shares the problems with her only friend, Istrid, who talks about her schooling. He too was having a hard time with everything. The boy offers to read his mind, and the girl succeeds. One night, Tisaya wakes the girls in the middle of a storm and takes them to the Tor Lara, the most powerful magic place in the continent, entrance to which is only open to members of the Wizard Brotherhood. Today there will be a test in the art of controlling the flows of chaos, which requires catching lightning in a bottle. The girls do not believe in such a possibility, and some get strong discharges even after catching the lightning. Yennefer's turn comes, and she reaches up with the bottle, but it is thrown back against the wall. Enraged, she directs her power at her more fortunate opponent, Tisaya, blocking her mental blow. Later she reprimands her apprentice she almost killed today, which means that her emotions can ruin her own. Tisaya cannot be sure that Yennefer will not go along with her feelings and harm his school, for she's to become a court sorceress, and the weak have no place near a ruler. The enchantress already doubts that there's anything in her that the wizarding chapter needs. Frustrated, Yennefer tells Istrid everything. But most importantly, the enchantress knows all about them and they won't be able to see each other again. The guy is willing to show her other, more ancient and powerful magic, but it is very dangerous. He shows her the skulls of the dead elves who built Aretuza. They were the first wizards of the continent, and they were the ones who built all the magical places. But humans came to the continent and slaughtered them. Istrid gives her a flower that can only grow where the elder blood rests and reads a spell, which by repeating it the girl opens a portal. The astonished wizard does not understand how she managed to do it the first time, and Yennefer confesses that her real father was a half-elf who died in the purge. It was his blood that made her ugly. The boy kisses Yennefer and confesses his love. Later she shows Tisaya the flower. It turns out that this was her assignment, to get the plant by applying the skills of false emotion. Yennefer hopes to be elevated. The enchantress promises that she will soon hear a knock and know when it is time. Meanwhile, Istrid is also reporting to his mentor Strigobor about what he has learned about the girl. One night Yennefer hears a knock at her neighbor's door and, taking the flower, goes after them. She peeks out as Tisaya turns the four of them into eels. The enchantress knows the girl is here and orders her to come out and push her former fellow students into the water. They are now the conduits of magic for Aretuza. Yennefer performs this and then sees many silhouettes of former schoolmates in the water. Time passes. Yennefer enjoys a love affair with Istrid, applying what she has learned to enhance the effect of intimacy. Thus, one day she created a whole crowd that watched her intimacy and then rewarded the lovers with applause. The guy is amazed at her imagination. What will she come up with next time? So the day of the final rite is approaching, after which they will be masters of their own destiny. Yennefer dreams of graduating from Aretuza and returning to her native Aedirn as a powerful sorceress to show her longtime abusers and her father what she's been able to achieve. In addition, all Aretuza graduates are perfected before being sent to the different kingdoms. All physical defects are removed, which awaits Yennefer as well. The wizard in charge shows her his work, the flawless beauty of the graduates, and promises her an equally wonderful result. He suggests making her color a noble but strong gray. Tisaya, on the other hand, teaches her to look in the mirror and see what Yennefer herself wants. She orders the girl to close her eyes and imagine the most powerful woman in the world. Yennefer complies with the order but does not yet see the promised beauty. Meanwhile, the chapter of wizards gathers in Aretuza to decide where their graduates should go, for all kings need court wizards. Then it transpires that one of the leaders of the council, the wizard Strigobor, knows that Yennefer is a quarter elf, which means that she will not be accepted at Aretuza, where there is a prejudice against elves. The chapter vows to send Yennefer to Nilfgaard, which the aspiring enchanter does not like. She demands an audience with the chapter, but Tisaya declares herself in charge of the distribution. Yennefer is beside herself. She has no intention of wasting her life serving the king of a small southern kingdom and a lover of women. The tutor reminds her of the elven blood, and the girl understands how Strigobor knew about it. The initiation ceremony begins, which Yennefer does not attend. Worried, Istrid finds her behind a letter to her father asking him to confirm that she's his own daughter. The boy does not believe that this letter can convince the chapter. But the girl simply does not know what to do, for even if Istrid disproves his words about her origins, no one will believe him anymore. The enchanter is frustrated. He didn't know why Strigobor needed this information, and she has already missed all the initiation spells. Istrid suggests that she should go with him, for he has been offered to become an explorer. They can travel the continent and discover the unknowable. But unexpectedly, the girl cruelly ridicules his plan. She's not going to dig through the dust of the ages at all, and these are his dreams and intentions, and her opinion, as always, he does not even ask. Istrid is shocked. Yennefer is not at all what he thought she was. and he expresses his opinion that she's angry because she missed her chance to find beauty. But a girl needs power, and she didn't experience so much hardship studying at the magic school for nothing. Yennefer runs to the enchanter who is in charge of perfection and demands to show her art. Not even the lack of a potion to dull the terrible pain that accompanies the transformation process stops her. As the magician begins the process, Yennefer asks for her eyes and the cut marks on her hands as a reminder of her former weakness, and the wizard informs her that every magic has a price. Having been reborn, she will not be able to walk, but the girl agrees to everything, even to the removal of her womb necessary for a complete transformation. The magician reads spells and the girl screams in terrible pain and rips the chains with which she was tied to the table. Her spine straightens, her entire body seems to melt and shift from one form to another. Finally, writhing in pain, Yennefer loses consciousness. Meanwhile, in the main hall of Aretuza, the initiation ball continues. Suddenly, Tisaya sees a door opening in which stands an unusually beautiful girl with violet eyes. She realizes that Yennefer has disobeyed her orders and hurries to take her away. But it is too late. The Aedern ruler has already noticed the beauty. He invites her to a dance where he expresses his desire to see her as court wizard in his kingdom. Tisaya has to retreat and only watch the dance of the king and the enchantress from afar. Directed based on a series of books by Sapkowski, The Witcher is quite curious, fascinating and vivid. The atmosphere of magic, the world of monsters and steel swords transferred quite well, so the adventures of the female protagonist will be even more exciting in the next episodes.